My name is Henwire, but that's not who I really was. In my past life, I was Qin Xiao, a regular guy who died in a terrible truck accident. I won't go into the ugly details, but let's just say it was painful and I didn't get to delete my browser history before I went. That still haunts me. When I opened my eyes again, I was a baby. A crying, helpless baby in a world that wasn't my own. A place called the Glevo world, full of kingdoms, dukes, gods, and magic. Up in the heavens, the gods of every race had just decided that humans would be the ones to face the next great invasion. The human gods were too weak and cowardly to argue back, so they just agreed. That meant everyone down below was in deep trouble. But something strange happened that night. Beings from an even higher dimension tossed streaks of light into the world. Nobody noticed, not even the gods. I think I might have been one of those streaks. Now here's what really made me mad. On the same night I was born, in a place called the Warrior Duchy, the Grand Duke Emir also had a son. That kid was a prince. But the Duke was worried about the coming war, so he secretly sent the baby away with his most trusted guard, Jinsen, disguising the whole thing as a tragedy, telling everyone the child had died. Jinsen got a small noble title and disappeared to some remote corner of the country. Smart move for the Duke's son. Lucky kid. And me? I was born in the Kai Kingdom, which was about to be invaded by 3 countries at once. My father was just a commoner. He looked at me once, then left for the battlefield. My mother held me and said I'd be called Henwire, and that maybe if my father earned some glory in the war, we could become a knight's family, and I'd inherit our mill and shop someday. A mill, a shop, that was my grand destiny. I wanted to scream. Where was my royal palace? Where were my servants? I was supposed to be a prince, or at least a nobleman. Instead, I got a flour mill in a war zone. I tried to file a complaint with the universe, but nobody was listening. After a few days of crying and protesting, I finally calmed down and accepted it. This was my life now. I lay quietly in my cradle and thought about everything. My old world, my parents who lost their son, my friends, that girl I once loved. They were all so far away now, in a place I could never reach again. I cried one more time softly. My mother came in and sang me a song I didn't know. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought burned bright inside me. In my last life, I was nobody. I lived small, and I died small. Nobody outside my little circle even noticed I was gone. Not this time. This time, I'm going to live so loud that the whole world will feel it when I'm gone. I refuse to stay a commoner. I'm going to rise. I'm going to become a noble, no matter what it takes. This world is garbage. The path from commoner to noble is practically sealed shut. I threw my book on the floor. I was only 3 years old, but inside I was a grown man, and what I'd been reading made me furious. Even with the best luck, it would take a commoner's family several generations to climb up to nobility. By now I could stay awake and think for about 10 hours a day. My body was growing well, better than most kids my age, actually. The good news was that my father, Obian, came home from the war in one piece. The 6 Kings War ended in a draw, though I could tell from listening to adults talk that it was really a fight over living space. The peace wouldn't last. My father did well in the war. He saved a baron's life several times and earned himself a nickname, Lucky Obian. But the baron could see it wasn't just luck. My father was different from the drafted farmers. He came from a merchant family. His grandfather started the business, and his father ran trade caravans. Traveling merchant roads in a feudal kingdom meant you had to know how to fight, so everyone in the family trained for combat. My grandfather even hired a knight squire to teach my father proper fighting techniques. Because of his background, when my father went to war, he didn't show up empty-handed like the other commoners. He brought his own sword, a leather-wrapped shield, repaired second-hand leather armor, and even a retired military horse. That caught the baron's attention, and my father was kept in the baron's personal unit instead of being thrown to the front lines as cannon fodder. Still, after a year of killing over a dozen enemies and risking his life countless times, my father's social class didn't change one bit. He wasn't even surprised. If it were that easy to become a noble, he said, everyone would be one. When my father noticed I was unusually smart for my age, he started buying me books, and books are expensive in this world. I learned to read and write the official language of the Kai Kingdom fast enough to shock him. So after my 4th birthday, he spent a fortune and even called in his favor with the Baron to get me into a nearby knight's manor. There, I studied alongside the knight's own son, receiving a proper noble education. I didn't mind. The food was great, meat every day. The other kids called me Little Rice Bucket because I ate so much, but I didn't care. My father was paying 3 gold coins a month for this. For reference, an average family of 5 in our town of Splitstream Bay spent about 2 gold coins in an entire year. 3 gold coins a month was a quarter of my family's income. People in town thought my father was crazy, but I made his money worth it. In 1 year, I learned to write, picked up noble etiquette, and started studying the continent's common language. And those were just the things I let people see. The real prize was what I stole in secret. Knight Cuckler, the owner of the manor, was the younger son of a viscount. He had no inheritance rights, but earned his knighthood through pure skill and was granted his own small fief, a village east of town. Every day, he trained his second son in the family's private cultivation method. It was never meant to be shared with outsiders. But nobody watches a 5-year-old playing nearby. At that age, most kids can't even stay dry at night, let alone understand combat training. So I watched. I memorized everything. The basic body conditioning, the bone-strengthening exercises, the coordination drills. This was knowledge that commoners and even merchants could never access. Of course, the basics alone wouldn't make me a real knight. For that, you'd need secret medicines and a special visualization technique to cultivate battle aura. Only then could you truly call yourself a knight. But I wasn't thinking that far ahead. First, I needed to grow strong. My plan was simple. Once I hit my teens, I'd reform my family's business, build up capital, and use my knowledge from my past life to invent things this world had never seen. I never planned to fight my way up the social ladder. Money could do the job just as well, if you had enough of it. But here's a lesson I should have remembered. Don't plan too far ahead. Fate is a nasty little thing. She likes to wait until you're feeling most confident, then jump out from the shadows and slap you right across the face, just to remind you how cruel and unpredictable she really is. The piece ended right after my 7th birthday. The 6 Kings War broke out again, and my father was called back to the battlefield by the Baron. I watched him leave, full of confidence, but I couldn't calm down. I knew this time was different. The first war was just both sides testing each other. This time, it was a fight to the death. 6 months later, bad news came. Not that my father died, but that our kingdom lost a major battle. A chunk of the eastern territory was now exposed to the enemy, and our little town of Splitstream Bay was right in the danger zone. Most people in town didn't understand what was coming. Some figured the enemy would just occupy us and charge higher taxes. No big deal, right? Wrong. I knew better. After 6 months of brutal, bloody close combat warfare, those soldiers had lost their humanity. Their nerves were shattered. When an army like that marches through, they don't just collect taxes. They burn, kill, and loot everything in sight. I ran to my mother and begged her to pack up the kids and flee to the nearest big city. We had a horse cart. We had money. We had time. About 2 weeks before the enemy's advanced troops would reach us. She didn't believe me. I was 7. No matter how smart I seemed, I was still just a child in her eyes. Abandoning our home and business based on a little boy's warning? She couldn't make that choice. So I made my own plan. Every night, I secretly hauled bags of grain and supplies into our family's hidden cellar, an old secret cargo room my grandfather built during his merchant days. Most people had forgotten it even existed. I was already 1.3 meters tall and had been secretly practicing the knight's body training method. So I was stronger than you'd expect from a 7-year-old. I could carry dozens of pounds at a time. For half a month, I worked like an ant, moving food bit by bit under the cover of darkness. By the 20th day, I had enough supplies down there for our family of 4 to survive over a month. That same day, refugees stumbled into town. They brought the news everyone dreaded. The enemy army was coming, and they were destroying everything in their path, turning the land into scorched earth. Now everyone panicked. People scrambled to pack and run, but it was too late. If refugees could reach us, the enemy's scouting cavalry was already circling the town. Trying to flee with women and children now was suicide. By evening, the enemy proved my point. They threw a pile of severed heads into the town, the heads of people who had tried to escape that afternoon. My mother broke down. She held my little brother and sister, crying and praying to the gods that the enemy would show mercy. I had to shake her hard just to snap her out of it. I should have listened to you, she sobbed. I cut her off. Mother, listen carefully. I've stored enough food in the hidden cellar to keep us alive for a month without going outside. The enemy isn't here to occupy. They're here to destroy, to create panic, to force our kingdom's army to split its forces. That means they won't stay long. A few days, maybe 2 months at most. We just have to hide and wait them out. She looked at me with wide eyes. What about you? Aren't you coming with us? I shook my head. I need to scout the area and keep watch. I picked up a bow my father had left behind and strapped a short sword to my waist. My mother started crying again. You're just a child, I smiled at her. That's exactly why the enemy won't notice me. The back trails aren't suitable for cavalry. They won't go there. And don't forget, I trained under Knight Cuckler. I'm a man now. Someday I'll be a knight. I gave her a thumbs up. Whether she believed me or not, she knew there was no other choice. So she grabbed my brother and sister, slung a pack over her shoulder, and followed me out the back door. I led them through narrow paths, stopping every few minutes to listen. When it was safe, I'd imitate a bird call to signal them forward. It took over an hour to cover just 1 kilometer, but finally the cellar was right ahead. Just then, fires lit up back in town. The enemy had begun. I pushed my mother to hurry inside. She hesitated at the entrance. You're not coming in? Where are you going? It's dangerous out there. I need to erase our tracks, I said. If I don't, they might follow our trail right to you. Before I left, I told her one last thing. Mother, don't open the door unless you hear our secret signal. And if I don't come back, don't come looking for me. If something happens, I'll hide and find my way back to you later. Then I grabbed a tree branch and started sweeping away our footprints in the dirt. I could feel my mother's eyes on my back, and I knew she was crying, probably feeling like she was about to lose her eldest son forever. I was terrified, but I couldn't let it show. I had 2 lifetimes of experience, and that made me braver than my mother and my little brother and sister. Someone had to protect them, and that someone was me. My feelings toward my parents in this life were complicated. I still missed my parents from my old world, but I couldn't ignore the love these parents gave me. I'm not a cold-hearted machine. Both my upbringing in this life and my values from the last one told me the same thing. I couldn't just hide while my family was in danger. So I stayed behind to cover our tracks. Call it repaying them for raising me. That's what I told myself. The fires in town were growing bigger. I knew I had to hurry. Soon the enemy's main infantry would arrive and the real pillaging would begin. While I was carefully sweeping away our footprints, I heard a sound, the whistle of an arrow cutting through the air. My body reacted before my brain did. I rolled out of the way just in time. Oh, a surprised voice came from the darkness. Whoever shot at me hadn't expected a child to dodge an arrow. I was scared out of my mind. I hadn't sensed anyone nearby at all. I grabbed my bow and tried to find the shooter's position. A little kid, huh? Quite alert for your age. Want to know where I am? Before I could react, a sharp pain hit the back of my neck and everything went black. The last thing I saw was a figure in black standing behind me, looking down with curiosity. My last thought was, damn it, I'd better get a good reincarnation next time. But I didn't die. I woke up with a horrible pain in my neck, inside a dark, freezing dungeon. It was packed with prisoners, most of them people I recognized from Splitstream Bay. Some were crying softly. Some stared at nothing. Most had their eyes closed, pretending to sleep, hoping this was all a nightmare they'd wake up from. Nobody paid any attention to a kid waking up. Their fear of what was coming next had crushed every other feeling. I spent 3 full days in that dungeon. No water, no food. People started dying, and the bodies just stayed there, rotting beside us. When someone called out to the guards to remove a corpse, a soldier came down, drew his sword, and stabbed the man through the bars. Then he killed 2 more people who screamed too loudly. After that, nobody dared say a word. I understood then. These soldiers wouldn't care if every one of us died in here. So I started catching rats in the cell and hiding them in the corner. I didn't know how long this would last, and I needed to survive by any means. Over the next 2 days, more people died. Nobody touched the bodies for food. It wasn't because they were too noble for it. The idea simply never crossed their minds. And I wasn't about to suggest it. Who knew how long we'd be trapped? If bodies ran out, a small child like me would look very appetizing to desperate adults. The first time I ate a raw rat, I tried to imagine it was some delicious meal from my past life. I managed 2 bites before I threw up. Nothing came out but stomach acid. I bit down hard on my own arm, using the pain to fight the nausea. I had to keep every drop of water inside my body. I refused to die like this, especially not from starvation. On the fourth day, soldiers finally came down, covering their noses in disgust. Everyone out. That was all they said before fleeing back up the stairs, away from the stench. I was incredibly weak, but I forced myself to stand. On my way out, I kicked at people who couldn't move, trying to wake them. Almost nobody responded. At the door, I turned back one last time and called out in a hoarse voice, "Get up! We're leaving." Nobody followed. I walked out into the light. The survivors were lined up by soldiers. Then 2 guards went back down into the dungeon. They came out moments later, nodded to the others, and soldiers threw oil-soaked wood and torches inside. Before the flames could reach the doorway, they locked the entrance with chains. I knew this would happen. The enemy army wasn't here to save anyone. They were here to destroy, to leave nothing useful for our kingdom. They wouldn't drag along people who couldn't walk. This was war between nations, not good versus evil. Just, them die, we live. War itself is the evil. Justice and wickedness are just words people use depending on which side they're standing on. I tried not to look around, but I couldn't avoid all of it. Bodies impaled on stakes. Women stripped and violated until they died. Children tossed on the ground like garbage. Days ago, these were people I knew. Kind neighbors, friendly shopkeepers, children I used to play with. Now they were nothing but cold, broken corpses. No matter how hard I tried to stay calm, a rage I couldn't explain rose up inside me. My anger didn't last long. Fear took over fast. Up ahead, soldiers were sorting through the prisoners. Old, sick, weak, stabbed and dragged aside like garbage. Children too young to be useful, killed with wooden spears without a second thought. These soldiers had probably been farmers just a year ago, but now they murdered unarmed civilians without blinking. People just like them. Fellow commoners. I understood what was happening. They were selecting slaves, people strong enough to haul supplies and do hard labor. A 7-year-old kid like me? I wasn't on their shopping list. I looked around. Cavalry patrolling. Armored infantry everywhere. Maybe I could catch one farmer soldier off guard and kill him. But then what? I'd still die in this hellhole. When it was my turn, the soldier doing inspections took one look at me and waved to the guy with the spear. I went cold inside and got ready to take at least one of them with me. Then a voice shouted, "Wait!" A rider from a passing cavalry group had turned back. My back was soaked with sweat. In the autumn wind, I felt the chill cut straight to my bones. The rider trotted over to me. "Little one, do you remember me?" I looked up. Gray hair, but young. Slim and tall. Slender fingers with calluses. He wore engraved leather armor, a long sword on his back, a short sword at his hip, a large bow hanging from his saddle, and 2 quivers of long arrows. His gear was too varied to be standard military issue. Then it clicked. I'd read about people like him. He was a ranger. A mercenary, but not the kind hired by some minor lord. He worked directly for the enemy's regular army. I nodded slowly. "You're the one who captured me." The gray-haired ranger smiled. "You've got a solid build, kid. You didn't even pass out right away when I hit you. I thought you were some nobleman's child. Checked into it. Turns out you're just a merchant's son. Disappointed me, so I tossed you in the dungeon and forgot about you. Went on a mission for a couple days. I'm honestly surprised you survived down there." He leaned down from his horse and studied me closely. "So tell me, how did human flesh taste?" "I didn't need anyone," I said. "Lying isn't a good habit, especially in your position. How about this? If you can convince me you didn't eat human flesh, I'll let you live." I pulled half a rat from my pocket and held it up. "I ate this." He blinked, then laughed. "Clever. Show me." Without hesitating, I bit into the raw rat right there in front of everyone. I chewed slowly, keeping my face blank, and swallowed it down with every ounce of willpower I had. The ranger watched with amusement. "Interesting. So dodging my arrow that night really wasn't just luck. How's the rat taste?" "Compared to dying," I said, "it's not that bad. Could use some sauce, though." He burst out laughing. "Good. You don't have to die. You're my slave now." I bowed. "Henwire, ready to serve." He took me to the main military camp outside town. Neat rows of tents, disciplined patrols. These were the real elite troops, nothing like the rabble back in town. At his private tent, the ranger pointed outside. "Go wash. You stink so bad it'll ruin my dinner." The food already tastes like garbage. I don't need the experience of eating it in a latrine. I grabbed a bucket and washed myself in the canal despite the freezing autumn wind. I washed my clothes too. An hour later, the ranger raised an eyebrow when he saw me dripping wet. You washed your clothes as well? You said I shouldn't affect your comfort. So I was thorough. He went quiet for a moment, then started playing with his short sword. Now you need to convince me not to kill you. You hide it well, kid, but I can see the hatred in your eyes. That's understandable. We destroyed your home and killed your people. But there's something else that bothers me. You're missing something most people would have, fear. And you have something most people don't, real calm. That makes me nervous. If I keep you around, one day you might come back for revenge. So go ahead. Convince me to let you live. I said, I can read and write. I know how to maintain armor and weapons. I know how to take care of horses. The ranger's head snapped up, not just because of the skills I listed, but because I'd said all of it in the Continental Common Language. He looked me over carefully, taller and stronger than a normal kid my age. Clearly trained, literate, speaks the common tongue, useful skills. Everything pointed to a nobleman's child, but he'd already confirmed I was just a merchant's son. Impressive, he said. But what does any of that have to do with keeping you alive? It means I can be sold for a good price, I said calmly. Enough to make up for whatever trouble I might cause you. He clapped his hands lightly. Good reasoning. I agree. But I want one more piece of insurance. You behave. No tricks, no funny business. If you agree to that, I won't go looking for your family members hiding underground. They can wait out this whole mess in peace. He knew. He knew about the cellar. He knew about my mother, my brother, my sister. I had no choice. Just like that, I went from a commoner to something even lower. I was a slave. When the ranger mentioned my family hiding underground, I snapped my head up and glared at him. He waved his hand dramatically. See? That look right there. Do you know how terrifying it is for a child your age to have eyes like that? That's why I'm debating whether to kill you. You give me this feeling that you'll become someone impressive one day, but I don't enjoy snuffing out potential. So, same deal as before. What do you say? He was right. The tracks I'd tried to erase wouldn't fool a real ranger for a second. I thought it over, then raised 2 fingers beside my head and swore an oath. I, Henwire, swear that no matter what happens, I will never seek revenge against Cave Eyes, he said. I will never seek revenge against Cave Eyes. He clapped his hands, satisfied. Strange way to swear an oath, but I can feel the sincerity. Good. As a reward for your honesty, I'll go clean up the remaining traces around your family's hiding spot. No one will find them. Now, tell me about yourself. Like you said, I need to sell you for a good price, right? Over the next few days, I became Cave Eye's personal servant. When he left on missions, I trained my body as hard as I could. When he returned, I helped him remove his armor, groomed his horse, sharpened and oiled his weapons, fetched meals, carried washing water, made his bed, and tidied his tent. After the first clumsy day, I performed like a trained servant. Cave Eyes even complimented my work, though he knew perfectly well I'd never been trained for any of this. I was just a fast learner, and I was learning more than chores. I started picking up the language of the Warriai Duchy, which this army belonged to. The 2 countries were neighbors, and both languages evolved from the Continental Common Tongue, like 2 dialects of the same language. Since I already knew the common tongue, it wasn't that hard. Under life-or-death pressure, I learned fast. I wasn't learning the language to spy on anyone. I had a much more practical reason: the cooks. When I went to pick up meals, the kitchen staff knew I was an enemy prisoner. Some of them had lost friends and family to our kingdom's army. They had every reason to spit in my food, or worse. But if I spoke their language, it would trigger something basic in human nature. People instinctively treat someone who talks like them as one of their own. Speaking their tongue would earn me a little empathy and a little more food on my plate. Of course, there was another reason too. I needed to understand what the soldiers were saying around me. I had no intention of being a slave forever. If a chance to escape came, knowing their language could mean the difference between life and death. I gathered what information I could. This army was the Duchy's 3rd Legion, codenamed Silent Battle Axe. Over 7,000 soldiers, mostly professionals. Their commander was Count Obican, brother to the Grand Duke of Warriai. 2 months ago, this was the very legion that flanked our alliance's right side, ambushed and crushed our 6th Legion, and opened the path for the enemy to invade our kingdom. They were no joke. Cave Eyes was a lone wolf mercenary hired directly by Count Obican. That gave him privileges, his own tent, access to the main camp. After about 2 weeks of rest, the silent battle axe prepared to march again. I packed Kavai's gear and even took down and folded his tent. That was supposed to be the supply team's job, but I wasn't here on vacation. The more useful I made myself, the safer I was. When Kavai's returned and saw everything ready, he tossed me a metal badge. I'm going ahead to scout. Carry my gear and follow the supply column. Here's a servant pass. Don't lose it, he paused. You're smart enough not to try running, right? I nodded quickly. Of course. The 3rd Legion is the only thing keeping me alive. Without its protection, the noble armies behind the lines would kill me on sight. They wouldn't even check my pass. Good. I hope you're still alive when I get back. I bowed. I wish you a safe return. And I meant it. Without Kavai's, I was dead. He smiled, tossed something at my feet, then mounted his horse and galloped away. I looked down. It was my old short sword and small bow, the ones I'd had the night I was captured. I understood what he meant. He was telling me to protect myself. In the chaos of war, anything could happen, and he wouldn't always be there to save me. After Kavai's left to scout ahead, the 3rd Legion marched out on the 3rd day. I followed the supply wagons, carrying dozens of pounds of gear on my back. The first day was brutal. Blood blisters covered my feet, and the straps dug bloody lines into my shoulders. The next morning I felt like my body was falling apart. But I had a trick from my past life, leg wrappings. Without them, I would have collapsed on day 1. By the 6th day, I'd gotten used to the rhythm. Along the way, I traded small items with the supply soldiers for useful things: a little cooking pot, an old water bag, 2 pairs of worn-out socks. It doesn't sound like much, but these meant I could boil water instead of gnawing on dry rations, soak my feet at night, and drink hot soup before sleeping under a supply cart in the freezing autumn air. The socks were especially important. I washed and rotated them every day. If your feet stay wet on a long march, they're done for. I knew the 3rd Legion was heading to attack Wildfield City, a major grain hub in the southeast of our kingdom. If the enemy alliance took it, their supply problems would be solved. Of course, our side knew this too and would defend it heavily. I thought about what outcome would be best for me. If the 3rd Legion won big, I'd have no chance to escape. If they lost badly, I'd probably get cut down in the chaos of retreat, a stray sword from panicking soldiers or pursuing troops. The best scenario was a long, drawn-out stalemate where morale crumbled and I could slip away in the confusion. One night, I had a nightmare. I was running, almost free, when an arrow punched through my chest. I turned around and saw Kavai's holding his great bow, staring at me with cold eyes. I woke up in a sweat and wiped my face with a damp sock. What else was I going to use a towel? 2 days later, I arrived near the battlefield. The camp was already built. In the distance, Wildfield City sat on the plains like a giant beast crouching on the earth. I'd been here once with my father when I was 5. At least 100,000 people lived inside those walls. It was one of our kingdom's biggest cities, with over 200 years of history and well-maintained fortifications that had been further reinforced during the past 6 months of war. The attacking force was bigger than I expected. It wasn't just the 3rd Legion. The Duchy's 5th Legion was here too, along with 2 legions from the Kingdom of Bilier and an allied cavalry legion. More troops were reportedly on the way, over 40,000 soldiers total. Even so, I didn't think they could pull it off. The city had thousands of defenders behind thick walls. With proper defense, they could hold out for a year. The Alliance's supplies, even after looting everything along the way, wouldn't last 3 months. Their supply line stretched 300 or 400 kilometers, dangerous and expensive. When the siege began, I watched from near Kavai's tent as the Bilier legions launched the first assault. What I saw made me cringe. No siege ladders, no siege towers, no catapults, just lines of archers shooting at the walls while infantry pushed a hastily built battering ram toward the gate. And the defenders weren't much better. No rolling stones, no boiling oil, no crossbow platforms, no organized volley fire. The archers on the walls had the high ground advantage but barely used it. They hadn't calculated proper arc distances, and instead of concentrating fire into kill zones, everyone was just shooting freely. As a casual military history fan in my past life, I was honestly embarrassed for both sides. If someone had put me in charge of the defense, at least half the attackers would be dead before reaching the walls. It took me a long time to understand why warfare here was so primitive. First, My old world had thousands of years of nonstop conflict that refined the art of war far beyond anything here. Second, wars in this world were led by nobles, and most nobles weren't exactly passionate military scholars. Third, and this was the key, if battles became too deadly, the noble officers on both sides would refuse to fight. Nobody wanted to lose their entire ruling class. In short, none of these countries were centralized powers. War here wasn't about total destruction. It was a game played by aristocrats, and the rules kept the killing within limits they found acceptable. Even though the siege was painfully amateur in my eyes, the Alliance still took Wildfield City. The trick was old but effective. A spy inside the city opened the gates at night. The silent battle-axe soldiers didn't even bother putting on armor. They just grabbed their weapons and rushed in through the darkness. The defenders had no plan for this kind of situation. By the time the 5th Legion marched in fully armed, it was over. The next day, all captured soldiers except nobles and valuable prisoners were executed. But the Alliance didn't loot the city. They needed it intact as a forward base and supply hub. 2 days later, I moved into a nice 3-story building in the city. It was Kavai's reward for his role in taking the city. He'd been the one who snuck inside, contacted the spy, and lured away the patrol so the gates could be opened. The Legion commander personally honored him with a big pile of money, partly to reward him, partly to attract other talented people. I cleaned the bloodstains off the floors and didn't ask about the previous owner. What good would knowing do? Life got much better after that. I took care of Kavai's daily needs and cooked his meals. He actually loved my cooking and said I had the makings of a great chef. Every day, he gave me money to buy food at the market. Because the merchants knew I worked for Kavai's, whose reputation carried real weight, the soldiers guarding the market eased up on their usual extortion when I was around. That meant lower prices, and I always managed to save a little from the shopping budget. I used the extra to buy myself second-hand clothes and shoes. Kavai's didn't care, as long as his meals stayed good. Then one day, I brought him a business proposal. "Master, would you like to make more money?" He tossed a dried fruit into his mouth. "Oh, tell me. I never say no to shiny golden darlings." My plan was simple. The Alliance soldiers had looted tons of art and jewelry from commoners and middle-class families. But the city's real wealthy nobles were untouched. They'd just paid a protection fee and carried on. That was the rule across the continent. Nobles were a class above, even enemy nobles. These local nobles were smart. They knew that no matter who controlled the city after the war, they'd still be nobles. So they were buying up looted treasures at rock-bottom prices, 1/10 or even 1/100th of their real value, knowing the pieces would skyrocket in worth once peace returned. "Chaos is a ladder," I told Kavai's. He repeated the phrase, impressed. "Well said." Then he leaned forward. "But why should I sell cheap here when I could carry everything to a peaceful region and sell at full price?" "3 reasons," I said. First, traveling through a war zone with fragile, valuable cargo is risky and inconvenient. Second, these items break easily. Damaged goods lose most of their value. Third, and most importantly, the real profit isn't in what you already have. It's in what the entire Alliance army has. He raised an eyebrow. Others must have thought of this too. Of course, the noble officers are already making deals with local elites. But thousands of regular soldiers have no connections to sell their loot. They'd rather turn heavy, fragile trophies into gold coins right now. And the warehouse managers guarding the army's stockpiles? They're human too. A piece goes missing here, another there. Who's counting? Why should they guard someone else's treasure for nothing when they could profit? Kavai stared at me. "You really are full of surprises. Are you actually 10 years old? Because you sound like you're 40. I bowed slightly. When your life depends on it, the brain works faster. He thought it over. "Fine. Give me a detailed plan and I'll handle the execution. I'm a fair man. If this works, you deserve something. But don't ask for freedom. That's off the table, and honestly, you wouldn't survive out there right now anyway." I didn't push. "This is just my duty. As for any reward, let's see how much gold it brings you first." Half a month after my business ideas started working, Kavai's called me into the tea room. He tossed a small bag on the table, some copper coins, and a few silver ones. "Don't complain it's too little," he said. "Any more, and the weight of it would crush you. That's your pocket money. But the real reward is something else." He told me he'd personally gone back to my hometown and resupplied my family's hiding spot with food and provisions. They were safe and could stay hidden longer. Then he offered to train me. Real combat training on top of the body conditioning I'd been secretly doing. What do you want to learn? Swordsmanship? Archery? I don't care what it's called, I said. I just want to learn how to kill, he smiled. That's what I like about you. You always cut straight to the heart of things. Sword techniques, secret arts, footwork, they're all just different ways of killing people. Training is just practicing how to respond in every situation. Starting tomorrow, I'll teach you everything I can. Maybe someday when you look back on this time, it won't all feel like humiliation. For the next 2 months, I trained under K's while keeping up my duties as his servant. Meanwhile, the war shifted. The Warrior Duchy had earned massive prestige by taking Wildfield City, which made the other allied nations jealous, especially the Kingdom of Bilier. Stung by embarrassment, Bilier pushed for a massive offensive. 6 regular legions plus noble armies, over 100,000 troops total, launched from Wildfield City toward Kuka City, the biggest city in Eastern Kai Kingdom. Taking it would split our kingdom in 3 and potentially end the war. Nobody on the Alliance side even considered the possibility of failure. After the army marched out, K's noticed my mood change. Worried your homeland will lose? He asked. I shook my head. I'm worried the Alliance will lose. The spy trick that worked at Wildfield City won't work at Kuka. That city has tens of thousands of defenders. And if trickery fails, what then? They'll just surround it. The Alliance outnumbers them. What about supplies? Kuka City is 600 li away. How do you protect a supply line that long? Pull troops from Wildfield City? Then what happens when our kingdom's army counterattacks here? K's understood. If the Alliance's rear got cut off, 100,000 soldiers would be trapped like lambs waiting for slaughter. Well, he said, wouldn't that be good for you? If your kingdom takes this territory back, you're free. I sighed. I'm worried I won't live that long. After a big defeat, angry allied soldiers will take it out on prisoners like me. I'd be one of the first to die. He read between the lines. Fine. What do you want? A new identity. One that won't get me killed by furious retreating soldiers. K's didn't answer right away. But a few days later, he told me to stay indoors and dyed my hair brown with some kind of solution. Then he invited a military officer over for drinks and introduced me, not as his captured slave, but as the orphaned second son of a knight from the Kingdom of Bilier who died in battle. According to the story, I had no inheritance rights and had been entrusted to K's care. I was just a young squire tagging along to gain experience. I played my part perfectly. I wore squire's clothing and greeted the officer with a proper Bilier-style noble bow. I spoke the Bilier language with the right accent. My Warrior Duchy language sounded deliberately clumsy, like someone still learning. As for the Kai Kingdom's language, I never spoke a single word of it again from that day forward. The officer's name was Fabio, a knight in title from the 3rd Legion, commanding 200 soldiers. He was the son of a major noble in the Warrior Duchy, but didn't have real knight-level combat skills. Over the following weeks, K's kept inviting officers over, casually introducing me each time. Fabio came the most often. He liked me and never questioned my story for a second. A month passed like this. Then the bad news arrived. It wasn't just that the Alliance was retreating. It was worse. Those 100,000 allied soldiers had been completely cut off from behind. Fabio and the other officers were in the tea room, cursing the Bilier Kingdom's commanders at the top of their lungs. Those idiots were trapped for 10 days before they even asked for help. The enemy's already dug in and taken every good position. How are we supposed to rescue them now? And they're blaming us. The handoff officers for the supply line were their people. The receipts even had the Alliance seal on them. Fabio noticed me pouring tea and apologized. Sorry, Henwire. We're talking about the stupid commanders, not your people. I just smiled politely and said nothing. I already knew what had happened. K's told me the day before. A force from our kingdom had slipped between Kuka City and Wildfield City and seized a small trading town called Fire Eye. The Alliance hadn't seen it coming because the soldiers arrived wearing no armor, just light clothes, moving fast. The Alliance scouts assumed they were just drafted farmers meant to harass supply lines. Unarmored troops weren't considered a real threat in this world. But here's what nobody on the Alliance side understood. Fire Eye wasn't just any town. It was a merchant transit hub. When trade caravans passed through, they stored goods in secret underground warehouses beneath their buildings. Dozens of them, maybe more. Each large warehouse could hold enough weapons and armor to equip thousands of soldiers. Those farmers who marched in with nothing. Once inside FireEye, they armed themselves from the hidden stockpiles. Suddenly, the Alliance had a fully equipped enemy army sitting right across their only supply route. It was a trap, a brilliant one. The Alliance had ignored FireEye because there was no one left to rob there. The merchants had all fled when war broke out, and the Alliance didn't have the manpower to garrison every empty town. So when our kingdom's troops moved in, they took it without a fight. Then it got worse. Our side had captured Alliance SEALs and used noble prisoners to impersonate supply officers. They intercepted several shipments from Wildfield City, so the 100,000 Allied soldiers at Kuka City went 20 days without supplies before anyone realized something was wrong. When the Alliance finally sent a few thousand soldiers back to investigate, they walked straight into a slaughter. Our forces held the high ground, outnumbered them, and crushed them. Now the Alliance was stuck. They couldn't go around FireEye. The detour was too long and the roads were terrible. They couldn't keep pushing toward Kuka City without supplies. And the defenders inside Kuka were starting to look like they might come out and attack. The Alliance had to pull back and consolidate just to avoid being hit from both sides. The Bilier officers blamed the Warrior Duchy for not clearing the supply line. The Warrior officers blamed Bilier for leaving only a few hundred men to guard such a critical route. Everyone was pointing fingers. Now the Alliance command had ordered the Silent Battle Axe, our 3rd Legion, still stationed at Wildfield City, to march on FireEye and crack it open. Another legion would attack from the other side. A pincer strike. After the officers left, Kavai's cornered me. Talk. I know you figured something out. I've treated you well. Don't let me walk into something blind. When I hesitated, he rolled his eyes. I saved your life, kid. If I die, that's bad for you too. At least right now it is. I sighed. It's just a guess. FireEye is a merchant city. It has lots of hidden warehouses underground, built by trade caravans to store goods. I doubt the Alliance ever found them. Kavai's froze. Then he grabbed his forehead. Damn it. It's a trap. He'd figured it out instantly. The Bilier Kingdom wasn't lying. There really was a fully armed regular army in FireEye. The scouts hadn't missed them. Those farmer soldiers they'd dismissed were the real troops all along. They just traveled light, then re-equipped themselves from the hidden arsenals once they reached the city. How much could those warehouses hold, he asked. My father told me once that a single large merchant warehouse could store enough equipment for several thousand soldiers. As for how many warehouses are in FireEye, I don't know exactly, but a lot. Kavai's rubbed his temples. It's over. This war is finished. Outside FireEye City, snow was falling and the wind cut like a blade. Then the screaming started. I watched from the rear as 2 armies, over 20,000 men, crashed into each other on the frozen plain. It was my first time seeing real large-scale battle, and nothing from my past life's movies came close. There were no heroes out there. Even the knights with their battle aura ran out of energy eventually, and after that they were just slightly stronger men who bled and died like everyone else. The Silent Battle Axe and the Bilier 9th Legion were supposed to pincer the defenders who came out of FireEye City. But then a second force charged out from the gates. The numbers were even, but the FireEye troops had been resting in warm buildings while our side had marched for days through freezing wind. Their hands weren't numb. Their bodies weren't stiff. They fought harder. The battle raged from morning to afternoon. Both sides took terrible losses, but neither would budge. One side was fighting for survival. The other was fighting to drive out invaders. Then the Bilier cavalry charged, too early. They smashed into the enemy lines and pushed them back toward the city walls, but within 20 minutes the horses were spent. The snow, the chaos, the low visibility. Cavalry couldn't do what cavalry was supposed to do. The FireEye troops retreated behind their walls in good order, while the Alliance soldiers banged their weapons on their shields and roared in victory. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. That evening, while I bandaged a sword wound on Kavai's body, I laid it out for him. The Bilier cavalry moved too soon. In this cold, the horses need rest after a hard charge. That means when the Alliance retreats, there'll be no cavalry cover. The soldiers are exhausted and drenched in sweat. If they march tonight, the freezing wind will kill them. If they wait until morning, they won't be able to get out of bed. Either way, these 2 legions can't withdraw without paying a horrible price. Kavai's didn't argue. He just pulled on his clothes and said, "Stay close to me." Count Abakan, the commander, wanted to stay behind and cover the retreat personally. His chief attendant knocked him unconscious and carried him away. Before the Alliance could even set up camp, the ground began to tremble. Enemy cavalry. Cave Eyes had told the Count what he'd scouted. 30,000 enemy troops were garrisoned in Fire Eye City, all regulars, plus 5,000 cavalry on standby. The Alliance never had a chance. Everything collapsed. Without their noble officers, who'd already fled into the night, the soldiers couldn't organize any defense. The silent battle axe, the supply crews, everyone scattered like frightened rabbits across the snowy darkness. The enemy cavalry didn't even bother killing anyone. They just kept herding us forward, never letting anyone stop. They didn't need to swing a single sword. The cold would do their killing for them. Anyone who got lost, fell behind, or got injured in the dark was dead. This was where my months of running training finally paid off. I kept pace with Cave Eye's horse at a steady jog, controlling my breathing, watching the ground, trying not to panic. Cave Eyes was an experienced ranger. He knew how to navigate in the dark and kept us moving in the right direction. We only needed to cover 10 kilometers. He prepared a hiding spot ahead of time. One night's rest there, then move at dawn. The enemy cavalry wouldn't chase that far. But the enemy riders were paying special attention to anyone on horseback. Those were likely officers or important targets. A squad of about 30 cavalry spotted our group. Cave Eyes wasn't alone. Several friendly officers were riding alongside him. The enemy saw a cluster of mounted men and smelled a big catch. Arrows flew. 2 officers went down instantly. One took an arrow through the neck. The other's horse was hit and threw him into the snow. Neither would survive, and nobody stopped to help. The remaining riders split apart, each hoping the others would draw the enemy away. Cave Eye's gray-white hair made him an easy target. 7 or 8 riders broke off and chased him specifically. But Cave Eyes was incredible. He spun around on his saddle, back against the horse's neck, and grabbed his great bow. He had 3 arrows pressed against the bow shaft. He fired one, then flicked the next onto the string with his fingers, 4 shots in rapid succession. 4 riders fell. The remaining 4 spread out and fired back. An arrow grazed Cave Eye's shoulder, but he didn't even flinch. His horse wasn't so lucky. 2 arrows hit it, and the animal reared up in pain. Cave Eyes kicked free of the stirrups, crouched on the saddle, shot another rider down, then leaped off and caught a tree branch overhead. Hanging upside down from the tree, he fired again. Another one down. 2 left. He dropped to the ground, dodged an arrow behind a tree, then stepped out and put a shaft through one rider's throat. The last cavalryman charged with his sword drawn, aiming for Cave Eye's neck. Cave Eyes ran straight at him, jumped high enough to be level with the rider, twisted his body flat in midair to dodge the blade, and slid his own sword through a gap in the man's armor. He landed lightly and flicked the blood off his sword. Then he looked at me hiding behind a rock. Pretty cool, right? Want me to teach you that? I wasn't in the mood for jokes. I grabbed his wounded horse, pulled out the arrows, and applied medicine. We need to move. Their friends will find these bodies and send more after us. Cave Eyes shrugged. I thought you'd be disappointed I didn't die. In this chaos, nobody on either side would take me in, I said. Even if they didn't kill me on sight, they wouldn't let me inside their camp. In this weather, being left outside means. Before I could finish, Cave Eyes shoved me aside and fired an arrow. I hit the ground and looked up. A fallen enemy rider, one who'd been thrown from his horse earlier, had survived and just shot an arrow at us. Cave Eyes killed him with a single shot. Then I turned and saw Cave Eyes sitting on the ground. An arrow was sticking out of his chest. I froze for a second, then rushed over. But this was a penetrating wound. In a world without modern medicine, that was a death sentence. The arrow had gone through his right lung. Blood bubbled from his mouth with every breath. I must have been bewitched by the goddess of bad luck, he coughed. Why else would I jump in front of an arrow for you? You can't die, I said, my voice cracking. If you die, my life gets much harder. Do you have any healing potions? Anything, he gave a bitter smile. Potions? A mercenary can't afford those. It's over for me, kid. You remember where my supply cache is? Go. Now. You're small, harder to spot alone. The rest of the road is yours to walk. He handed me his great bow and longsword. You're destined to be someone extraordinary. Keep these as a memento. Proof that I existed. I took the weapons. After a pause, I asked, "Do you have any unfinished business? If I survive this hell, I'll try to take care of it for you." His eyes were growing distant. "Unfinished business? Plenty, but none of it concerns you anymore. Just don't hate me. That's enough." I nodded. "A dead man's debts are cleared. You dragged me into this nightmare. You ripped me away from safety. But tonight you took an arrow for me. We're even." He laughed weakly. "A dead man's debts are cleared. What a practical thing to say. You really are something else. Are you really just a child? I hope I." His voice faded. Then he stopped breathing. His empty eyes stared up at the dark sky while snowflakes landed on his face. I sat there for a moment. Then I wiped the snow from his face and gently closed his eyes. I found a cavalry cloak nearby and laid it over his body. "We were on opposite sides," I said quietly. "You hurt me and you saved me. But you taught me a lot. That makes you half a teacher. I can't bury you properly right now. If I get the chance, I'll come back for your body. If not, I'll remember this spot and come pay my respects someday." Then I cursed. "Damn you, cave eyes. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gone through any of this." And then, softer, "Thank you, cave eyes. I was too optimistic before. Without you, my whole family would have starved to death in that cellar." The wind and snow were picking up. I turned to leave, took a few steps, then walked back. I bowed to his body one last time. Then I slung his long sword in great bow across my back and walked into the storm, alone. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that minutes after I disappeared into the blizzard, the snow-covering cave ice body suddenly burst upward. He sat up, gasping for air. He watched the direction I'd left and murmured to himself. Then he pressed his hand against the arrow in his chest. A soft white light glowed from his palm. The arrow dissolved into nothing and the wound sealed shut. He'd been hiding his true power the entire time. He jumped to his feet, picked a new name for himself, and said with a grin, "Good luck, kid. Go build your legend." Then he walked off in the opposite direction and vanished into the storm. I didn't know Cave Eyes was still alive. In the chaos of that night, the fighting, the snow, the darkness, I missed all the clues. A ranger as skilled as him would never forget to finish off a fallen enemy. That last rider's arrow should have targeted Cave Eyes, not me. But I was too exhausted and scared to think it through. I stumbled through the blizzard alone, navigating by wind direction after climbing over a small hill. I stuck to the side paths, avoiding the main road. The snow was getting heavier, which made walking harder, but at least it was slowing down the enemy cavalry too. About a kilometer from Cave Eye's hidden shelter, I spotted someone lying by the road. He was still alive, but he was stripping off his clothes. I recognized the symptom from my past life, paradoxical undressing. His body's temperature regulation had gone haywire. His brain was hallucinating warmth. If nobody helped, he'd freeze to death in minutes. I almost walked past him. Then I saw his face. It was Fabio. I stopped. My protector was gone. In this weather, without a city or shelter, I'd eventually die too. But Fabio knew me. He trusted me. If I saved his life, he could become my new shield. I stabbed my dagger into the nerve cluster near his shoulder. The sharp pain snapped him awake. "Sir Fabio, put your clothes back on. We need to move. It's only 200 meters to safety." It was actually closer to 1,000 meters. But if I told him the real distance, he'd give up right there. So I lied. Over and over. "How much farther? We're halfway there. This feels like more than 200 meters. Trust me." Cave Eyes prepared a shelter. He's a scout ranger. He always has hideouts. "See that big rock ahead? It's right there. We're at the rock now." "Where's the shelter?" "Just behind it, under that big tree." About 300 meters from the cave, Fabio collapsed. No amount of encouragement could get him back on his feet. So I laid him on his cloak, threaded the sheathed long sword through the shoulder of the fabric, and dragged him. Dragging a fully armored grown man 300 meters through heavy snow. I wasn't even 8 years old. Even with all my training under Cave Eyes, my body hadn't finished growing. The only thing that saved us was that the last stretch sloped downhill, and we could slide part of the way. By the time I cleared the entrance to the cave, my clothes were soaked through with sweat. But I couldn't rest. I ran inside, lit the pre-prepared fire, then ran back out. I stripped Fabio naked and rubbed his whole body with snow until his skin turned pink, a technique to restore circulation. Then I dragged him inside, wrapped him tight in blankets, and finally took care of myself. I changed into dry clothes Cave Eyes had stored in the cave, drank some hot soup, and finally felt human again. After eating, I went outside one more time to make sure the firelight wasn't visible through the cave's cover. Cave Eyes had set this place up well. 2 hidden vents for smoke and air. We wouldn't suffocate. Sitting by the fire, watching the sparks rise and float, I started thinking. Should I kill Fabio, take his head, and use it to surrender to our kingdom's army? No, too risky. The Allied forces had probably captured plenty of officers by now. If any of them had seen me at Cave Eye's place, my fake identity as a Billier Knight's son would be exposed. I couldn't let myself be seen by both sides at the same time. But if I didn't use this chance to get back to our side, when would the next opportunity come? I couldn't stay with the enemy forever. And there was an even bigger worry. Could our kingdom actually win this war? If they lost, and I'd already switched sides, I'd be doomed. There was no perfect answer. I felt like one of those sparks from the fire, drifting wherever the wind pushed me, destined to flicker out in silence. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd land somewhere and start a blaze of my own. I thought about my future, about my mother and siblings hiding in that cellar, about whether my father was still alive somewhere. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep against the cave wall. A few hours later, I jolted awake, grabbed my short sword, and checked on Fabio. Still unconscious, but no fever. I peeked outside. The snow was a foot deep and it was still dark, maybe 4 in the morning. I added more wood to the fire, found a comfortable position, and went back to sleep. When Fabio woke up, I opened my eyes too, because I'd tied a string between his wrist and mine while he slept. I didn't trust him yet. I quietly untied both ends before he noticed. I gave him water and heated up some soup. After eating, he said it was the best bean and meat stew he'd ever tasted. I smiled. Let's hope we don't need that kind of appreciation again. He stood up, dressed in his dried clothes, and gave me a formal noble's bow. Henwire, you saved my life. I swear on my family name. If I make it back alive, I will repay you. I bowed back carefully. Sir Fabio, we're comrades. I'm too young for the battlefield. I made sure to say that clearly so he wouldn't get ideas about sending me to the front lines, but it's my honor to share this hardship with you. He patted my shoulder and asked where we were. I drew a rough map with a stick. We were about 10 kilometers southwest of Fire Eye City, off the main road. The heavy snow had erased our tracks. Fabio suggested waiting, then heading to supply station number 14 for horses. I shook my head. We leave this morning. The enemy will destroy the nearest supply stations to completely cut off the route between Wildfield City and Cucka City. If we're late, we'll be trapped. He looked at me curiously. How do you know all this? My heart jumped, but I kept my face calm. I don't. Cave Eyes told me these things. He accepted that without question. Then he paused. Speaking of Cave Eyes, where is he? Why do you have his weapons? I let my eyes go red. He's dead. When I found him, he was already gone. I could only take his weapons. I couldn't even carry his body. I'd rehearsed this story several times, forcing myself to think about my parents from both lives to make my eyes water on cue. I couldn't say we got separated. That wouldn't explain why I had his personal weapons. Fabio believed me. He patted my head gently. From now on, you stay with me. That was exactly what I'd been waiting to hear. We geared up properly this time. Boots that kept snow out, clothing that blocked wind and cold. Fabio recovered fast. He wasn't a real knight in power, but his body was far above a normal person's. I was jealous. Meanwhile, I had something he didn't. Experience walking in snow from my past life. So we kept pace with each other. We marched all day through deep snow to reach Station 14. Plenty of scattered soldiers had already arrived, most in terrible shape. We rested only a few hours, then took 2 mules and rode out into the night. I told Fabio that warhorses were too delicate for this weather. What we needed wasn't speed, but endurance. Mules were tougher and easier to care for. Even mules were faster than walking. We reached the next station before dawn, swapped for fresh mules, and kept going. We passed Station 12 without stopping. Instead of heading to the next station, we detoured to another one of Cave Eye's hidden shelters for the night, in case the enemy was catching up. It was the right call. By the next morning, there was still no sign of the enemy. The terrible weather had slowed them down too. We made it back to Wildfield City. Barely. Fabio told me later that we'd escaped by the thinnest margin. If we'd stayed even a little longer at that first cave, we would have been caught. We'd literally outrun death. A few days later, the casualty report for the silent battle axe came in. Out of over 7,000 soldiers, fewer than 1,000 made it back. Less than a fifth of the officers and nobles survived. The legion was effectively destroyed. But the official report didn't say that. It listed just over 1,000 dead. The rest were marked as missing, partly to save face, partly to save money. Death benefits for fallen soldiers were expensive. Missing soldiers cost nothing. I understood the game perfectly, but it wasn't my problem. Right now, my priorities were simple: eat well, grow stronger, and figure out what to do next. Good. Your foundation is solid, Fabio told me one morning. The Knight's body training method you've been practicing is the standard one most families use, a prerequisite for any real family technique. But you've picked up some small errors. Follow my movements, and we'll fix those habits. He patiently walked me through a complex set of motions, almost like gymnastics. I watched every detail like my life depended on it, because it did. This was knowledge money couldn't buy. It belonged exclusively to the noble class and never trickled down to commoners. Back at the Knight's Manor in Splitstream Bay, I'd been stealing glances at training sessions. Without proper guidance, mistakes were inevitable. Kavai's had taught me how to fight and survive, but he was a ranger, not a knight. He hadn't bothered correcting my body training form. Now I finally had a real teacher willing to guide me properly. I wasn't about to waste a second. At the same time, I knew my place. Saving Fabio's life didn't make me his equal. I noticed he seemed to be related to Count Obakin, which meant I needed to be even more careful. No matter how many times Fabio told me to relax, I kept acting like a proper little squire, tending to his meals, his gear, his daily needs. Through Fabio's circle of noble officers, I learned the news. The Alliance's 100,000-strong advance force had been completely wiped out. The only reason the enemy hadn't counterattacked Wildfield City yet was the heavy winter snow blocking the roads. Everyone knew that by spring, a massive battle for this city was coming. So I used the winter to prepare. Every morning, I ran with weights on my back. Fabio said long-distance running wasn't important for becoming a knight. I didn't care. I wasn't training to be a knight. I was training to outrun death. When the chaos came, whether I was escaping or slipping away, running speed could save my life. In quiet moments, I worried about my family. Kavai's had promised to move my mother, brother, and sister from the cellar to somewhere safer after I told him about Fire Eye City's hidden warehouses. He'd said he would tell me their location after the battle. But then he died, and the information died with him. Sometimes I wondered if he'd been lying the whole time, using my family as a leash to keep me obedient. For a mercenary, he'd seemed strangely invested in me. It didn't quite add up. Whenever these thoughts ate at me, I'd grab Kavai's long sword and swing it around the courtyard until I was too tired to think. The sword was a hand-and-a-half blade, 1.2 meters long, taller than me. Forged from thunder steel, a special metal that made a deep rumbling sound instead of a bright ring when struck. I named it Daybreak, a reminder that this nightmare would end someday, and I'd see the light. Daybreak was still too big for me to wield properly. Most of the time, I preferred the short sword my father had given me, a blade just over a foot long, perfect for my size. Swinging the big sword was really just exercise to burn off frustration. Winter passed quietly. Both armies rested. But I never stopped, absorbing everything I could like a sponge. Languages, combat techniques, noble etiquette, survival skills. When spring arrived, nobody celebrated. I knew what was coming. The flowers that would bloom on this land would be fed by blood and fertilized by corpses. Maybe I'd live long enough to see them. Maybe I'd become fertilizer myself. Because the silent battle axe had been destroyed, Fabio was reassigned to lead a unit of noble private soldiers, 300 conscripted serf soldiers. His connection to Count Obakin at least got him a personal guard of about 10 cavalrymen and 40 surviving battle axe veterans. That kept him from looking completely pathetic among the other noble commanders. When I saw the serf soldiers for the first time, I stopped complaining about the regular army's quality. Compared to these people, the troops I'd mocked were genuinely elite. The army in front of me included boys as young as 12 and old men with gray hair. This was supposed to be a fighting force? Yes, I was barely 10 myself. But I was confident I could kill any of the young serf soldiers in single combat. At range, I wouldn't even be scared of the adult ones. Fabio, used to professional soldiers, looked at his new command with barely concealed disgust. He drilled them relentlessly, but the results were pitiful. Turning these peasants into real soldiers? Even Fabio didn't believe that was possible. Watching Fabio try to teach these surf soldiers proper combat formations and fighting techniques was painful. In my opinion, he was wasting his time. These people would be better off learning to recognize flag signals and marching in formation. At least neat rows of soldiers might intimidate the enemy a little, or help more of them survive when it was time to run. But I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't my place to tell a noble how to train his troops. When spring came, the Allied Kingdom's army showed up at Wildfield City just as expected, picking off supply stations one by one before arriving at our walls in early March. Most of the Alliance soldiers were stationed in camps outside the city, facing off against the enemy lines. Fabio and his surf soldiers were out there too, which made him furious. I actually preferred it. The city might seem safe, but I didn't trust it. The Alliance had taken this city with a spy opening the gates at night. Why couldn't our kingdom do the same thing back? This was their city, after all. How many people inside were still loyal to the Kai Kingdom? What secret plans had been left behind? Nobody knew. That city could become a trap. Out here in the open, if things went wrong, I could run. For weeks, it was just small skirmishes. I even watched some entertainment, night duels, warrior contests. Then came the day Fabio led his surf soldiers into an actual battle. What a joke. Both sides sent their surf soldiers forward, but both noble commanders quietly steered their armored personal guards away from each other. Instead, the guards targeted the other side's unarmored serfs. Armored men against farmers with pitchforks. It was a massacre, not a battle. Both sides killed a bunch of each other's serfs, declared victory, and went back to camp. Fabio came back bragging. "Did you see me out there, little henwire? I charged through the enemy twice. Nobody could stop me. When my horse collapsed from exhaustion, I fought on foot, still untouchable, right? Very heroic. Slaughtering farmers who didn't even have matching weapons. And his horse didn't collapse from exhaustion. He fell off. If his guards hadn't rushed in, those serfs would have skewered him with pitchforks. And the way both sides' armored knights passed within arm's reach of each other without attacking? Nobody mentioned that part. But I put on my most worshipful expression. Sir Fabio, I saw everything. You were incredible. The other nobles were all praising your bravery. He laughed and slapped my shoulder. Go get some wine and food from the supply depot. I'm hosting friends tonight. That evening, Fabio pulled me in for a drink before letting me go. The other nobles complimented him on having such a capable young squire. Everything was running smoothly, all thanks to little henwire. Once I stepped outside the tent, I dropped the smile. I could hear them in there, bragging about their glorious deeds. Across the field, the enemy noble who'd fought today was probably doing the exact same thing. I walked to the surf soldier's tent, held up my oil lamp, and called out, "Anyone injured today, come here. I had medicine, real medicine, not the useless scraps the army gave to serfs." I'd requested it from the supply depot under Fabio's name when I picked up the wine and meat. You might ask about the military doctors. Yes, they existed, for real soldiers. Surf soldiers weren't considered people. The army doctor and supply officer had said so to my face. So I treated the wounded myself. I wasn't a real doctor, but I could clean wounds and stitch them shut. Part of me couldn't bear watching these people die from neglect. They were human beings. Without treatment, these wounded men would be dead within days. Part of me wanted to practice the medical skills I'd been studying. And the most important part? Helping these serfs cost me almost nothing, but it bought me something priceless, gratitude. If everything fell apart someday, and I needed help, these men might reach out a hand. Sometimes the difference between living and dying is just one hand pulling you up. I worked through the night under a dim oil lamp, stitching ugly wounds while breathing in the thick smell of blood. By dawn, I treated every injured man. I dragged myself back to Fabio's tent, cleaned up the mess from his party, and collapsed on the floor beside his bed. Fabio didn't wake until afternoon, too much wine. By then I'd already prepared his washing water and laid out fresh clothes. He rubbed his aching head. "Little henwire, I can't imagine what I'd do without you. Did you see Baron Vance last night? He used to be so proper. I'd bet he hasn't changed his clothes in 2 weeks. The smell." I smiled. "Perhaps the Baron has been too busy training his troops to worry about laundry." Fabio burst out laughing. Training troops? He didn't even dare lead a charge last battle. Last night, he was secretly trying to buy enemy heads from me to pad his kill count. Since the war started, he hasn't killed a single enemy soldier. Only civilians. Isn't that pathetic? Sir Fabio, wake up! Wake up! He blinked at me, half asleep. What? Is it morning? I grabbed his armor and started shoving it onto him. It's not morning. The city has fallen. What city? Wildfield City. 2 gates are breached. The enemy is already inside. We need to gather our troops and get out of here before it's too late. He finally woke up when he heard the sounds of fighting coming from the city walls. Through the firelight, we could see fierce combat on the ramparts. The camp outside was already in chaos, officers and soldiers running in every direction with no idea what to do. I'd been right all along. That city was a trap waiting to spring. The Alliance had taken it with a spy at the gates, and now our kingdom had done the exact same thing back. Fabio stood there in shock. How is this possible? There were tens of thousands of troops inside. I pushed him. That doesn't matter now. Assemble our men before we get swept up in this. It took a full hour to gather his serf soldiers. When we finally moved out through the left side of the camp, Fabio saw the 4 regular legions marching toward the city to fight, and suddenly he wanted to join them. We should go support the battle. I wanted to stab him. Sir, we're a private noble army of serf soldiers. We have zero capability in a real fight. The best thing we can do is stay out of the way. His guard captain snapped at me. Shut your mouth. You're telling Sir Fabio to run? You want to disgrace him? The other guards drew their weapons, yelling about charging into battle. I made a mental note to deal with that guard captain someday. Then we all saw it. By moonlight, a large, organized army advancing toward the camp from outside. Given the direction and the situation, it obviously wasn't one of ours. Fabio shouted for signal flares. Nobody had any. We were a peasant army, not a professional legion. We didn't carry that equipment, and the camp was still too chaotic to mount any real defense. He drew his sword. Then we'll hold them here. By time for the camp to organize, I spoke up one more time. Sir, we have a few hundred men. They have over 6,000 armored soldiers. How much time can we buy? And how many nobles in that camp will actually send help? We should retreat. Live today, fight tomorrow. How dare you keep telling him to run? The guard captain barked again. Before Fabio could decide, the enemy army reached the camp's edge. Soldiers lit torches, dipped arrows in oil, and launched 5 volleys of fire arrows. Only a small part of the camp caught fire, but it was enough. The camp exploded into panic. This was what soldiers called camp shock, total breakdown. Men stampeded in every direction. Soldiers drew weapons and attacked anyone who came near them, friend or foe. When you don't know where the enemy is, everyone looks like the enemy. Fabio finally understood it was time to go. Follow my banner. Head toward southeast, I whispered. Southeast. We're advancing southeast. Yes, advancing. Once we cleared the camp, everyone instinctively sped up. I knew this was dangerous, so I called out to Fabio. He rode back to me. Sir, we're moving too fast, I said quietly. If we're out front running at full speed, that's desertion. We need to slow down and wait for other units behind us. When more troops catch up, we'll have strength in numbers, protection against ambush, and most importantly, we'll be conducting an organized retreat, not leading the retreat. Your rank isn't high enough to take the blame for this. Let someone with a bigger title be the one in front. From now on, we're not running. We're holding position to receive friendly forces. It took him a moment, but when he understood, his face lit up. He slapped my shoulder. You're brilliant. If your father hadn't died, I think you'd have been the best heir in your family. Following my suggestion, Fabio positioned our troops beside a valley entrance and stopped. We rested and waited. Over the next 3 hours, scattered soldiers trickled in. Any who arrived without officers were absorbed into our force, put under Fabio's guard members. By dawn, thousands of retreating soldiers had found us. When they saw a force of over 4,000 waiting in formation at the valley mouth, they nearly fainted from shock, then nearly wept with relief when they realized we were friendly. By noon, 1,000 enemy cavalry arrived, chasing stragglers. But when they spotted our assembled force, especially over 1,000 cavalry arranged in neat battle lines, they turned around without hesitation and rode away. When the enemy cavalry turned back, Fabio let out a huge sigh of relief. He had good reason to be nervous. That 1,000-strong cavalry formation we'd put together was a complete bluff. The real cavalry, noble guards and officers' escorts, didn't even number 1,000. The rest were armored infantry sitting on transport mules, pretending to be horsemen. It took us 2 hours just to arrange them into something that looked like a formation. If anyone had moved, the whole trick would have fallen apart. If those enemy riders had tested us with even a small probe, we'd have been finished. Fabio wiped the sweat from his forehead. How did you know they wouldn't attack? Their job was just to chase scattered soldiers, not fight a real battle. If we pinned them down, we had almost 10,000 men behind us. They're mostly serfs, sure, but the enemy didn't know that. Their lives matter to them. A living soldier can collect his reward. A dead one gets nothing. Fabio looked at me with complete trust now. No trace of seeing me as a child. So what do we do next? I pointed back toward Wildfield City. We go back. What? Go back, he nearly shouted, then caught himself and lowered his voice. Isn't that suicide? I explained it step by step. The enemy couldn't wipe out over 100,000 professional Alliance soldiers. At most, they'd take the city. Our main army would pull back to the outer camps. Our supplies were in those camps. If we kept running with no food or gear, we'd starve. We had to go back. Then what was last night about? Fabio asked, confused. Last night, staying in camp meant dying in the stampede. Now it's daylight. We have numbers, and the enemy's focus is on the city, not us. It's safe. And here's the best part. Going back now is a huge achievement for you. We can say you anticipated the route, moved your troops behind the camp to catch fleeing soldiers, blocked the enemy pursuit, and then bravely led everyone back to reinforce the main force. Fabio's grin spread so wide he couldn't hide it. Yes, that's exactly what happened. That's what I planned all along. So we marched back. Over 20,000 stragglers behind us. The road was littered with bodies. Most hadn't been killed by the enemy. They'd run themselves to death in the panic. Fabio looked at them and went pale, realizing that could have been him if he hadn't listened to me last night. On the way, he got nervous again. Will the commanders actually believe our story? I looked at him flatly. Of course not. They'll know we ran. His face went white. But, I continued, we're the best runners of the bunch. We stopped the rout, gathered the soldiers, and brought them all back. Those are facts nobody can argue with. The command doesn't care about the process, only results. And the result is, you did great. The battle report writes itself. Every noble's reputation stays intact, and they'll all owe you a favor. You'll be rewarded, he relaxed. What kind of reward do you think I'll get? I told him I couldn't guess what the high command would decide. But privately, I already knew. They'd put Fabio in charge of this combined force of noble private soldiers. It wasn't a combat role. These serf troops would be used as labor, maintaining the massive camp, doing the grunt work the professional legions wouldn't touch. The original prisoners and slaves had probably all fled during the chaos, so someone needed to fill the gap. And that was exactly the trap I'd set. Normally, these tens of thousands of serf soldiers would have died in the rout. Losing them wouldn't have affected the Alliance's fighting strength at all. But now Fabio was bringing back over 30,000 mouths to feed. Last night's raid had definitely destroyed some of the Alliance's supply stores. Adding 30,000 useless eaters to an already strained supply chain? That was going to hurt. I was just a small nobody. This was the only way I could tilt the scales of this war slightly toward my kingdom's side. It let me vent a little anger. I never forgot I was living in the enemy's camp. Pushing them toward defeat meant pushing myself closer to freedom. At the same time, elevating Fabio's status meant better protection for me. Why didn't I just run last night? Because fleeing through a chaotic battlefield is gambling your life on a coin flip. And I don't gamble when I don't have to. Everything went exactly as I expected. The command welcomed Fabio back like a hero and made him commander of the serf army. Not the only commander. Several higher-ranking nobles shared the title. But just as I predicted, they all owed Fabio a favor. They rarely opposed his decisions and were happy to let him do the actual work. If things went wrong, he'd take the blame. If things went right, they'd share the credit. Fabio kept coming to me for advice, but I deflected every time, claiming ignorance. No way was I going to keep playing strategist. He was a real general now, and if I kept whispering in his ear, people would notice. I was supposed to be a little squire from a dead knight's family, not some military genius. If I became famous in the enemy's army, how would I face my own kingdom after the war? My family had no powerful connections. We'd be executed as traitors in the post-war purge. So I stayed in my lane. A good little servant, a capable squire, nothing more. Fabio eventually figured I was just one of those people who only shine under extreme pressure. Fair enough. That worked for me. As his personal attendant, my status rose with his. Nobody in the supply chain dared disrespect me anymore, which made life much more comfortable. The war in the city played out roughly as I'd guessed. The Alliance held about a third of Wildfield City, and both sides ground each other down in brutal street fighting, block by block, house by house. 3 legions fought inside, while 12 more camped outside. Supplies looked fine for now, but deep behind enemy lines, the pressure would build over time. Summer arrived, and I used Fabio's position to get myself some nice gear. A custom-fitted chainmail shirt, a set of small leather armor, and a bow made to my specifications by the Army's weaponsmiths. But the real treasure was what Fabio gave me personally, 5 bottles of night cultivation medicine. Each tiny bottle cost over 100 gold coins at cost price, several times more on the market. You coat your entire body with it before practicing the Knight's body training method. It strengthens muscles and bones and heals hidden injuries from training. Fabio said 1 bottle should last about 2 months of training benefit. Mine ran out in less than a week. I thought I was doing something wrong and asked him about it. The second bottle lasted 6 days. Same thing. In just over a month, I'd completely absorbed all 5 bottles. But the results were extraordinary, far beyond what Fabio described as normal. I now had strength exceeding most adult men. My bones, muscles, and stamina had all improved dramatically. For a moment I got excited. 7 years in this world, and finally, was this my cheat ability? The golden finger every reincarnator is supposed to get? Had the Transmigration Bureau finally remembered my starter bonus? I waited eagerly through another month until my 8th birthday. Nothing else happened. No special power awakened. I told myself maybe it would come when I turned 18. By now I stood 1.5 meters tall with a balanced build. I didn't look 8 at all. People would believe me if I said I was in my teens. As summer faded, the Alliance command knew they had to act before winter trapped them. The fighting suddenly intensified. The spark that lit the final powder keg came from the serf soldiers, specifically from Fabio's daily patrol. He'd spent 2 months training 3,000 of his best serfs into a decent force and even managed to equip them with armor scavenged from dead professional soldiers. Combined with his 1,000-plus silent battle-axe veterans, his 5,000 troops were the reason he held his position as overall serf army commander. Fabio loved parading his well-drilled serfs past the enemy's ragged serf units. He'd sneer and shout insults at them, and usually their officers would swallow the humiliation. Not today. Today's opponent was a hothead. When Fabio started his usual taunting, a young man on the other side grabbed a bow and put an arrow right into Fabio's chest plate. It bounced off the armor without doing real damage, but the insult was massive. Fabio couldn't let that slide. Not as a noble, not as a commander. He immediately ordered a charge. His troops were stronger and pushed the enemy back quickly. When their commander was killed and they were about to collapse, enemy reinforcements arrived. They were still weaker than Fabio's armored serfs, but the numbers grew. Seeing Fabio getting surrounded, his guard captain fired a signal. Over 1,000 elite guards stationed outside the main camp charged into the battlefield and joined the brawl. Things spiraled out of control fast. The nobleman Fabio killed turned out to be the youngest son of a count in the Kai kingdom. His older brother brought reinforcements to avenge him. Then more troops from both sides piled in. By the time I got word, tens of thousands of men were fighting on the plain, including 2 professional legions on each side. Every unit in both camps was scrambling to join. As Fabio's well-known squire, there was no way I could sit this out. Every other noble's private army had already rushed to help. If I stayed behind, people would talk. Was I too young? Nobody cared. I was tall enough. Plenty of officers had seen me train. They'd praised my swordsmanship. In their eyes, I was ready. So I finally stepped onto the battlefield I'd spent years trying to avoid. I didn't ride a horse. Standing tall on horseback would make me a target. Some knight might think I was a noble's son worth capturing or killing. I couldn't explain my real identity to either side. So I mixed in with the infantry where it was safest. Relatively safest. I wore chainmail under leather armor. No serf's blade could get through that, and it stopped arrows well. I'd sparred with serf soldiers before and could handle 3 at once. But on a real battlefield, anything could happen. Knights get killed by farmers with pitchforks. My small body wasn't invincible. I tried to calm my nerves as we marched closer. My heart pounded harder with every step. Then we crashed into the fight. Screaming, metal clashing, officers shouting. It all blended into a demonic hum that rattled something deep in my skull. My carefully planned strategies dissolved into nothing. A serf in front of me suddenly grabbed his throat and fell backward. His blood sprayed across my face. Everything went red. Before I could process what happened, a spear thrust came at my head. I leaned back on instinct and dodged it, but the attacker slammed the shaft down onto my chest and knocked me flat. I rolled away from his follow-up stab. Survival instinct took over completely. I grabbed his spear shaft and used his own pulling force to spring back to my feet. The motion yanked him off balance. As he stumbled forward, I drove my short sword into his chest. His heart was pierced. His strength drained instantly. His hands slid onto my shoulders, and his weight pushed me down. I shoved the body off and stood up again. He was young, maybe 20. He had to be at least 20. I told myself that. I tried not to look at his face as I pulled my sword free, but it wouldn't come out. My hands had no strength. No matter how many times I'd imagined killing someone, doing it for real, watching a person die by my own hand, someone only a few years older than me, hit me like a wall. This wasn't a game, not a movie, not a novel. I had actually killed a human being. But the screams around me snapped me back. I bit down hard, yanked the blade free, and moved forward to the next enemy. Time blurred. After my fourth kill, I was gasping and wiping blood from my face. That last one had been tough. Big guy, homemade leather armor that actually worked, stronger than me. I had to use my smaller size and footwork to get around his guard and stab him through the ribs. After that, I decided to stop standing out. In a battle this massive, there would always be another opponent. Killing more would only draw attention. So I found a safe match, a middle-aged man who clearly couldn't fight well, just swinging wildly in straight lines. I could have killed him in seconds, but instead I danced around him, pretending we were evenly matched, running out the clock. When the horns finally sounded retreat, I kicked my bewildered opponent away and sprinted back to camp before anyone else. The poor man probably had no idea why the kid who'd been struggling against him suddenly vanished. Back at camp, I stripped off my armor and started treating my wounds. A slash on my left arm, an arrow graze on my right leg. I cleaned and stitched them myself, praying those weapons hadn't carried tetanus. I couldn't feel any pain. Adrenaline was still flooding my system. Damn it, I was still just a kid. Was all this adrenaline going to mess up my growth or something? Lucky Henwire? Brave Henwire? Which title do you prefer? Fabio teased me after the battle. I shook my head. It's not as impressive as people say. The enemies were fooled by my age. They underestimated me, and that's the only reason I got lucky. Otherwise I'd be dead. Fabio's smile faded. He put his hand on my arm. Henwire, this is my fault. I promised you wouldn't have to fight. I broke that promise, and it shames my family's honor. I told him not to worry. The battle had been unexpected for everyone. I reminded him I was part of the army, so fighting was technically my duty. But I'm still too small. Give me a few more years to grow, and I'll be a proper warrior at your side. He smiled. I believe you. You'll be a knight someday, and I'll make sure you get the title. But for now, I've given orders. You won't fight again. Stay in my tent and handle my affairs. And as compensation for breaking my word, ask me for anything. If I can get it, it's yours. Don't refuse. This is about my honor. I thought for a moment. Could I have more of those cultivation medicines? Of course. He didn't even hesitate. After he left, I let out a long breath. No more battles meant my survival odds just jumped dramatically. Against serf soldiers, I had every advantage and still got wounded. If they'd thrown me against professional legions, I'd be dead for certain. My mind was already spinning ahead. This accidental battle would trigger a full-scale war. The Alliance wanted to retreat, but needed to do it safely. Our kingdom was pressuring its allies to drive the invaders out quickly. Both sides would clash one final time. When the Alliance finally pulled back, the noble private armies would fall into chaos, and that would be my chance to escape. I'd run back to my family's hidden cellar, wait for the enemy to leave, and when our kingdom's army reclaimed the land, I'd reappear as if nothing had happened. Nobody could prove I'd served the enemy. Then the delivery arrived from Fabio, and my fantasy shattered. Inside the box were 14 bottles of cultivation medicine, neatly arranged. My face lit up with joy, and then my blood went cold. I caught myself instantly and kept the excited expression. carefully putting the bottles away like a kid with a new toy. But inside, my mind was screaming. The number was wrong. Not too few, too many. 5 or fewer would mean Fabio valued me somewhat. More than 5 would mean he seriously wanted to invest in me. But 14? That took resources Fabio couldn't gather on his own, and certainly not this quickly. Someone with real power was behind this. There was only one person it could be: Count Abakin, commander of the Silent Battle Axe, Fabio's relative, the most powerful man in this army. I'd been noticed. This was bad. I could fool a young, inexperienced noble like Fabio. But Abakin was a seasoned veteran. If he was watching me, my carefully constructed cover could unravel fast. I could smell danger closing in. What I didn't know was the conversation happening at that very moment between Fabio and the Count. Abakin asked Fabio what he thought of me. Fabio called me smart and talented, a good future helper for their family. Abakin wasn't satisfied. Is that all you see? Then Abakin revealed something Fabio hadn't known. Fabio was his youngest son. He had no inheritance rights. Abakin had pushed him into the war to earn enough merit for a proper title. But after the disaster at Fire Eye, where Abakin nearly lost his son, he'd softened. He moved Fabio to the safer, noble private army. When Fabio, guided by me, turned that retreat into a triumph, Abakin decided to give him more responsibility and more resources. The 14 bottles of medicine weren't just for me. They were Abakin investing in whatever asset was making his son look good. And there was something else I couldn't have known. A hidden agent had been watching me when the medicine arrived, reporting my every reaction back to Abakin. The Count had warned his man not to underestimate me. Anyone that KNEELS valued enough to fake his own death over and still leave on good terms is no ordinary child. Abakin knew about KNEELS. He knew about the fake death. He was watching everything. The net was tightening around me, and I had no idea how much they already knew. Lately, I kept feeling eyes on me. Given my suspicions about whoever was backing Fabio, I didn't think it was my imagination. Something was going on, and I needed to be careful. My plan was to use my one real advantage, being a child. This was a feudal army, not some modern military with strict discipline. The camp had an ancient institution, the pleasure tents, a place where women served the officers and nobles. Here's the thing about men: they love to show off in front of women. Like peacocks spreading their feathers, military officers bragged about secrets and important matters to impress their companions. They didn't care. These were just women selling their company for money. Could they even understand military affairs? Would they sell intelligence? Nobody worried about that. And the women gossiped among themselves too, competing over whose patron was more powerful, more generous, more trusting. The standard of comparison wasn't just gifts, it was how many secrets their patron shared with them. These women weren't stupid. If an adult man came asking questions, they'd shut their mouths instantly. But a 10-year-old kid? No threat at all. Especially one who regularly brought them nice things. Fancy clothes, rare cosmetics, little luxuries I'd traded from soldiers. A quick wash, and these items bought me their affection, and their guard was completely down. They chatted freely around me, never suspecting that this child's body held a 30-year-old mind that understood every word. In just one day at the pleasure tents, I pieced together enough to understand my situation. Fabio was Count Abakin's youngest son. No inheritance rights. No property. His mother's family had managed to get him a basic knight title 3 years ago. Not hereditary, not landed, barely above the lowest rank. Fabio had always resented his family for this, and his relationship with them was strained. The Count's heir was Fabio's eldest brother, a high-ranking officer in the duchy's 4th Legion. Brilliant, decorated, respected. Even Fabio admired him. Abakin's original plan was simple. Put his youngest in the Silent Battle Axe, let him earn some minor glory, then use that as justification to promote him to at least a hereditary baron after the war. But Fire Eye City destroyed that plan along with the entire Legion. When Abakin learned Fabio had survived, the relief changed him. He moved Fabio to the safer, noble private army. What I didn't know was that KNEELS had been hired not just as a scout, but specifically to protect Fabio. When KNEELS died, Abakin lost his son's bodyguard, which was another reason he'd moved Fabio out of the regular legions. Then came the bombshell that truly shook me. 2 weeks ago, during the street fighting inside Wildfield City, Fabio's eldest brother, the heir, the golden child, the pride of the family, was killed in action. How he died didn't matter. On a battlefield, death comes in 1,000 ways. What mattered was this. With the heir dead, Fabio was now the best candidate to inherit the county. His second brother hadn't even joined the war and had a bad reputation. Talented in business, sure, but weak in combat and leadership. For an important military family like Abacan's, that wouldn't do. Fabio, meanwhile, was already commanding nearly 20,000 troops as the effective leader of the entire noble private army. He had real battlefield achievements. Even before his brother's death, his post-war prospects looked like a hereditary viscountcy at minimum. Now he was being groomed as the next count. And that's where I came in. Abacan had noticed that his supposedly dim youngest son had suddenly started making smart decisions. He'd traced that improvement back to one source, me. The intelligence I'd gathered was close to the full picture, but I was still missing a crucial piece. Kavai's wasn't just some freelance mercenary. His connection to Abacan ran much deeper than I understood. That truth would take me a long time to uncover, but I knew enough to be worried. The Count was watching me. He knew I was the brain behind Fabio's recent successes. And now that Fabio might become his heir, Abacan's interest in everything around his son, including me, had just multiplied tenfold. The walls were closing in. After learning everything, I spent a whole night thinking. Count Abacan wanted me as a future retainer for Fabio, someone raised from youth with brains, talent, and fighting ability. The perfect loyal servant. Before the war, my plan was to build wealth back home and maybe become a noble by 25, if everything went perfectly. Now I had a shortcut. If I followed Fabio to the Warrior Duchy, I'd train in far better conditions than my birth family could ever provide. I could achieve knight status before 20, help Fabio rise to count, and as a founding supporter, I'd easily earn a barony. Best of all, I'd have a powerful network backing me instead of fighting alone. Was this betraying the Kai kingdom? Honestly, I had no loyalty to any feudal state. The only person I owed loyalty to was myself. By morning, I made my decision. If fate was handing me this chance, I'd grab it. But there was something critical I'd overlooked, something my limited experience in this world and my assumptions from my past life blinded me to. That mistake would come back to haunt me terribly. The next day, I went to Fabio with a proposal. Sir, what's the real difference between professional soldiers and noble private armies? Why is the gap in fighting ability so huge? Training. Equipment, he said. I shook my head. Your 3,000 elite serfs have decent equipment and plenty of training, but they still can't beat 500 professionals. The difference isn't gear, it's treatment. No pay, no family allowances, no death benefits, terrible food. You can't expect a horse to run if you don't feed it. He rubbed his temples. I know, but we don't have the resources. I lowered my voice. Sir, how long before the final battle? A month or two at most. And will the alliance win? He went silent. He wanted to say yes, but he was a military man. He knew the truth. Retreat was coming. It'll be less than a month, I said. Our supplies last 3 months, and the retreat covers hundreds of miles with no major cities for resupply. Tens of thousands of troops burning through food. The command won't wait long. And when the alliance retreats, a big chunk of the serf army will be left behind as a rearguard sacrifice. Fabio's face went pale. He knew I wasn't exaggerating. The alliance would protect its professional legions and leave expendable troops to slow the pursuit. So you want us to build a stronger army, so we're too valuable to abandon? He asked. No. We volunteer to be the rearguard. His eyes went wide. Sir, you're the supreme commander of the private armies. Everyone else can run. You can't. It would destroy your reputation. But here's the thing. The alliance needs us right now. So if you go ask for more supplies, weapons, armor, they'll say yes. They have plenty from all the destroyed legions. Better to give it to us than abandon it during retreat. He understood that part. Then panic set in. But we'd still be the sacrificial rearguard. We could die here. I walked to the map and pointed south of Wildfield City. We set up defensive positions at Six Bay Mountain. Over 30,000 serf soldiers. At least 20,000 will make it there. In a defensive position, we can hold for 5 days minimum. And then what? The roads south are limited. If the enemy pins us down, we can't retreat. Sir, will the enemy know we're just serf soldiers? Of course. The moment we fight, they'll see through us. And what's their real goal? Killing us. He shook his head. No. They want to catch and destroy the alliance's main force. Exactly. So why do we have to retreat south? I picked up my short sword and drew a line across the map, eastward. Why can't we retreat east? It leads back to the duchy just the same. Fabio went to his father. I don't know exactly what was said, but Fabio came back and told me the deal was basically done. The command would approve his requests. Count Obakin had only said one thing at the end: come back alive. I'll give you a chance to prove yourself. Now it was time to prepare. We should train them into real soldiers, Fabio said eagerly. I shook my head. There's no time for combat techniques or formations. That takes months. What we need is to pick the strongest young men from the serf army, and with the pay and benefits you're offering, they'll line up to volunteer. The other nobles won't stop you either. If they want to keep their own serfs, they'd have to stay behind as rearguard themselves. Noble lives are precious. They'll hand over their men gladly and even thank you for it. I took a sip of water and continued. We're not selecting elite fighters. We're selecting people who can march long distances with us during the retreat. Stamina and endurance matter most. The real challenge isn't individual running. It's running together in formation. We've lived through 2 major retreats already. You saw what happens when an army scatters. It's a disaster. So every day, morning and evening, you personally lead these men on formation runs around the camp. They need to learn breathing rhythm, pacing, and how to move as a unit. And your cavalry guards run too. Their horses carry supplies and armor instead of riders. Fabio agreed, but then asked me something I'd been expecting. Henwire, why are you choosing to help me now? I know you. You're brilliant, but you've always hidden it, afraid of drawing attention. You could just follow the main army out safely. Why step forward? I had my answer ready. I hid my abilities because I'm a child in a war zone. Standing out gets you killed. Back home in peacetime, I'd show off like any kid. As for why I'm helping you, I'm ambitious beyond my age. My father is dead. If I go back to the Billier Kingdom, I have no inheritance, no future. But here, with you, I see an opportunity. If you succeed, you'll be rewarded. A hereditary title is practically guaranteed. And when I grow up, you can help me earn a knighthood. Your future and mine are tied together. Our interests are the same. Fabio stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time, not a boy, but a grown man in a child's body. Then he drew his long sword and placed it on my shoulder. I knew instantly what this meant. I dropped to one knee and placed my left hand on my right shoulder. Henwire, he declared, by my family's honored name. Rhine, I accept your loyalty. I, Fabio, swear to regard you as a brother. Let the gods and honor bear witness. I bowed my head. I will protect Sir Fabio and help you achieve greatness for your family. He pulled me to my feet with a grin. From now on, you're my little brother. No more hiding what you can do. Our lives are tied together now. You can count on me, sir. In my mind I was thinking, as long as you don't betray me, I'll push you as high as you can go. If luck is on our side, even the Grand Duke's seat isn't impossible. The next day, I helped Fabio recruit. With real pay, proper food, and full sets of armor on offer, nearly 10,000 young men signed up in a single day. The nobles didn't just allow it. They came to Fabio offering additional help, grateful they wouldn't have to stay behind themselves. That afternoon, Fabio personally led the first formation run around the camp. By evening, his voice was gone from shouting. He told me, soaking his feet in hot water, that he'd never imagined how hard it was to make people run in a straight line. It took all afternoon just to organize them into squads. Once they started running, the formation collapsed within 500 meters. Over just 5 kilometers, dozens of men literally ran themselves to death. Following my advice, the next day, he sent his personal guards down into the squads, one guard leading 40 serfs each. Morning run, evening run. By the 3rd day, at least nobody got lost anymore. After 7 days of training, the serf soldiers could finally run in formation without getting lost. Well, except for a few idiots who still ended up in the wrong squad. Both sides mocked us. The enemy laughed at soldiers who only knew how to run. Our own alliance troops called Fabio the running general behind his back. Fabio didn't care. Every day, morning and evening, he ran with his men around the camp, first shirtless, then gradually adding gear until they were doing full weighted runs in the summer heat. I ran with them too. I had to admit, the people of this world had impressive physical ability. Back in my old life, an untrained person couldn't finish 5 kilometers. Here, These farmers could do it fairly easily once they learned proper breathing and pacing. Part of it was naturally better bodies, but mostly it was because in a feudal world without cars or buses, everyone walked everywhere their whole lives. Their legs were built for distance. By my calculations, a serf soldier in light armor carrying weapons and a day's supplies could run 7 or 8 kilometers without stopping. My plan only needed them to manage 5 as a unit. No infantry force could chase us 5 kilometers and still have the energy to fight. For 2 weeks, the two armies kept clashing in small skirmishes while the alliance quietly prepared to leave. Then came the day it all broke loose. A routine 1,000-man battle escalated, and suddenly the alliance threw several full legions into the fight, wiping out an enemy legion before reinforcements could arrive. The Battle of Wildfield City had officially begun. 250,000 soldiers fought for 4 straight days. Neither side won decisively, but for the alliance, not winning meant losing. Retreat was now certain. On the 5th night, 2 legions slipped away south under cover of darkness. By the 10th day, the enemy still hadn't attacked our camp. They'd taken heavy losses too and had already recaptured the city. With the political objective achieved, nobody was eager to assault a cornered army. That night, Count Abakan left with the last regular legion. He didn't say goodbye to Fabio. Now it was just us. Fabio's serf army, nearly 20,000 in armor, plus over 20,000 regular serfs. Per our agreement, we had to hold position for 2 days after the last main force departed. The next morning, Fabio ran his troops around camp as usual, loose, sloppy, just like always. The camp still had plenty of cooking smoke, sentries on the walls, cavalry patrols, armored soldiers drilling. Everything looked exactly the same as yesterday. The enemy wouldn't notice anything had changed. While Fabio ran, I was at the supply depot, sorting through everything the Alliance had left behind. There was still plenty: food, medicine, equipment. I had the old and weak soldiers baking flatbread all day. I gathered the carts and modified them into smaller, faster wagons. I organized every useful medicine. By evening, the enemy still hadn't moved. They apparently hadn't realized the main army was gone. The second day, Fabio ran his troops just once. That evening, I ordered the most generous meal we could manage, all the meat we couldn't carry. Better in our stomachs than left for the enemy. Then I told Fabio, we leave tonight. But the 2 days aren't up yet. We'll set up our defensive line at 6 Bay Mountain and keep blocking from there. And scatter all the gold and silver across the camp before we go. You want the enemy to waste time looting? We're supposed to burn the camp. We can't leave supplies for them. The supplies don't matter. If we leave the camp intact, the enemy has to send troops to search and secure it. That means fewer men chasing us. Your orders say keep the pursuit off the main army for 2 days. That's all that matters. Nobody's going to complain about the details, he agreed. His guards spread treasure throughout the camp. After dark, we moved. My 10,000 trained runners formed a protective formation around 20,000 regular serfs, pushing over 1,000 carts. Fabio had rehearsed this several times, but the real thing was still messy. Still, messy and moving was infinitely better than a panicked rout. We marched all night. At dawn, Fabio finally called a halt. When will the pursuit come? He asked. This afternoon. The enemy will notice something's wrong this morning, but they'll probe carefully. They won't enter the camp until noon. Then they'll spend hours looting. If we're lucky, they won't organize a proper chase until evening. But we can't reach 6 Bay Mountain in 1 more day. Cavalry could catch us easily. Cavalry won't charge a formation head-on. They're too valuable. We put the trained runners at the rear. The riders who come will just be scouts trying to track us. They won't dare attack. Everything happened exactly as I predicted. By evening, a handful of enemy scouts appeared behind us. When they saw our organized rear guard marching in formation, they didn't even probe. A few peeled off to report back. The rest followed at a safe distance, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. On the second night after leaving camp, we reached 6 Bay Mountain, where 3 mountain ranges meet, with a river alongside. Complex terrain, easy to defend, hard to attack. Exactly what I needed. Following my plan, Fabio announced to the 20,000 ordinary serf soldiers that they'd be building fortifications here. They'd get fed, get paid, and when the work was done, they'd receive severance money and their freedom. They could go wherever they wanted and take as much food as they could carry. Anyone who chose to stay was welcome too. Food and shelter provided, no frontline fighting required. With those terms, the serfs worked like demons. Following my blueprints, defensive walls and positions went up fast. Enemy scouts watching from a distance realized the problem immediately. This mountain pass, once fortified on both sides with heavy infantry plugging the middle, could hold against 100,000 men. When the enemy's cavalry pursuit force arrived the next day, they just scratched their heads. They were light riders meant to chase and harass, not siege troops. The terrain was too tight for horses. Arrow towers were already going up on the mountainsides, commanding the high ground. They had zero desire to attack. I'd anticipated this. The cavalry left on the second day, wheeling around to bypass us and chase the Alliance's main army instead. Cavalry had the speed to take the long way around. Infantry didn't, and infantry was what would eventually come for us. To my surprise, the enemy foot soldiers didn't arrive until the third day. And even then, they didn't attack. They'd marched over 100 kilometers to get here and were exhausted. They just sat across from us, resting. On the fourth day, they sent a few hundred men in formation toward the valley entrance. Before they even reached our barricades, a storm of arrows drove them back. I nearly lost my mind. I ran to Fabio and demanded he enforce strict fire discipline. A few hundred men and our archers had unleashed a massive volley. That was criminal waste. Every arrow we shot was one we couldn't replace. I'd insisted on bringing every arrow we could carry from the camp precisely because defensive warfare depended on them. Making new ones took time and skill we didn't have. This was exactly why I designed the arrow towers. I'd personally surveyed the terrain and used geometry to calculate optimal firing positions. Each side of the valley had pairs of towers marked with matching colored flags. The towers were positioned so that if an attacker raised a shield against one, the tower on the opposite mountainside would hit him from behind. Like crossfire from machine guns. Maximum killing zone, no blind spots covered. This was probably the most valuable knowledge I'd brought to this world from my past life. But nobody, not Fabio, not any officer, understood the principle behind it. They just thought I was a clever kid. The underlying science of interlocking fields of fire? No one cared. The towers went up across both mountainsides like colorful dots. Only the attackers below would learn what those colors really meant. I later heard that after we left, the enemy took over this position and spent the next decade building it into a massive fortress called Mountain Bay Fortress. It blocked several invasions for the Kai Kingdom. Years later, I would personally lead an army back here and break through the very defenses I designed. But that was the future. Right now, I was using these fortifications to grind down enemy lives without mercy. Standing on the heights watching the battle, I thought about my old world. Humanity, there was insane too. Every scientific breakthrough got turned into a weapon almost immediately. Now here I was, doing the same thing. After 3 full days, the enemy hadn't even cleared our barricades at the valley entrance. The casualties I'd inflicted were staggering. Fabio was getting nervous. Henwire, we've killed so many of them. Can we really get away clean? We've already held them far longer than required. Let's just run. I shook my head. Not yet. First, we haven't killed enough of them. They're not afraid yet. Second, our own men haven't died enough either. Only men who've seen blood and stared death in the face can transform from serfs into soldiers. Fabio stared at me. He couldn't figure me out anymore. Was I cruel? I spent every free moment treating the wounded, caring for injured men with my own hands. Was I kind? Every decision I made left a river of blood behind it. After the main fortifications were complete, Fabio kept his promise and released the 20,000 regular serfs. Most left. Only about 3,000 stayed. Combined with the trained new army, I still had over 20,000 people. That was too many. Too large a group was slow, conspicuous, and would attract serious pursuit. The ideal number for our escape was around 10,000, which meant the new army needed to lose roughly a third of its men in this fight, while killing enough enemies to make them too cautious to chase us hard, but not so many that we seemed like a force worth destroying at all costs. Walking that line was going to be the hardest calculation of my life. Fabio found me on day 13, covered in blood. The casualties are too high? We need to leave. He'd just led his personal guard into the front lines to plug a breach. Since day 9, the enemy had been hitting us with everything they had. They even sent soldiers climbing the mountainsides to knock out my arrow towers, but our rested defenders on the fortifications pushed them back every time. Charging uphill in heavy armor with medieval weapons is exhausting work. At first, the enemy took massive losses just reaching our positions. But their generals quickly figured out we weren't regular alliance troops. Our soldiers were tough, but sloppy. It was the fortifications doing most of the killing, not the men. So they sent their best units. I wanted Fabio to spread his veteran guards among the new soldiers, one experienced fighter for every 10 recruits, acting as backbone and teacher. In life-or-death combat, people learn incredibly fast. 2 rounds of fighting with veterans beside them, and these serfs would transform into real soldiers. But Fabio kept his guards together as a separate strike force. Without that anchor, the new troops crumbled against elite enemies. We were trading casualties at a 1-to-2 ratio, and we were the 1. In 3 days, we lost several thousand men. Today, the enemy punched through our lines. Only Fabio's desperate charge with his guards saved us from a complete collapse. We've lost over 6,000 men, he shouted at me, eyes bloodshot. How many more have to die? 4,000 more, I thought. But I didn't say it. Instead, I pointed at the enemy. They haven't lost enough yet. Give me 2 more days. Then we go. Fabio sat down on a rock, defeated. Morale is collapsing. I don't know if we can hold. We promised to bring people back to the duchy, I said quietly. We never promised to bring everyone. If some of them don't trust you enough to follow when it's time to leave, that's their choice, not our problem. He stared at me for a long time, then stood up and put his helmet back on. I hope you're right about this. The next afternoon, the enemy rolled out their trump card, a heavy armored battalion, thousands of ironclad soldiers pushing into the valley like a black tide. Fabio saw them, and his blood ran cold. Arrows couldn't stop them. Our soldiers certainly couldn't. Then a strange rumbling started. It grew louder. On both sides of the valley, boulders began rolling downhill, some half a meter across, some taller than a man. They bounced and accelerated down the slopes, gaining terrible speed. I'd prepared this days ago. Workers had loosened rocks on the mountainsides and positioned them for exactly this moment. The enemy commander screamed for retreat, but it was too late. The heavy infantry was deep inside the valley, packed tight in their dense charging formation, weighed down by their own armor. The avalanche of stone crashed into them like a natural disaster. Over 5,000 heavy troops went in. Barely 1,000 came out. The regular soldiers ahead of them panicked, lost their will to fight, and got caught in the carnage too. In total, the enemy lost several thousand men in one engagement. That evening, Fabio came to me, practically glowing. They're showing signs of pulling back. We held them. We leave tonight, I said. What? They're retreating. Why rush? The men are exhausted. At least give them a day to rest. That's exactly why we run now. We have to give up this position and let the enemy take it. It has to look like they broke through and we fled. If we stay and they withdraw on their own, we stop looking like disposable serfs and start looking like a dangerous main force. The next army they send won't just chase us, they'll hunt us to extinction. But if this particular enemy unit gets credit for conquering our fortifications, they'll exaggerate our strength in their reports to make themselves look heroic. And any future pursuit force will think twice before chasing such a formidable foe. That boulder trap had been too devastating. I'd meant to make the enemy cautious, not humiliate them. Wiping out their heavy infantry was like kicking them between the legs. We had to leave before they decided revenge was worth more than strategy. I also made sure Fabio didn't kill the prisoners today. We left them behind along with enemy wounded from previous days, a deliberate signal. It told the enemy, look, we didn't suffer that badly. Here's proof you can show your superiors. Take the win. Let us go. Everyone except today's exhausted frontline fighters packed up that night. After midnight, we climbed over the ridge using routes I'd scouted in advance and slipped out of 6 Bay Mountains range. The next morning, the enemy cautiously occupied our empty fortifications. They confirmed which direction we'd gone, but not a single general volunteered to chase us. They quickly found their excuse. Our mission was to break through and pursue the Alliance's main army. Why would we chase that dangerous side force? Nobody argued. After marching all night along the river, we put over 50 kilometers between us and 6 Bay Mountain. I told Fabio to let everyone rest by the riverbank. We were safe for now, but I couldn't sleep. I spread out the map and studied our route. The border of the Kai Kingdom was about 400 kilometers east in a straight line, but the actual march would be at least 600 kilometers on the best roads, and we couldn't use those roads. Marching down the main highways of the Kai Kingdom would be political suicide. Not because the garrisons along the way could stop us. They couldn't. But because a foreign army parading through their territory would humiliate the kingdom. They'd have to respond, even if the frontline generals didn't want to chase us. So I designed a complicated route through the southeast, zigzagging through remote areas. Nearly 1,000 kilometers total. Traveling by night, resting by day, it would take about a month. Along the way, we'd need to resupply near a few major cities. I planned to buy what we needed, not steal it. The Alliance's scorched earth policy on the way and had destroyed the countryside and forced the enemy to commit more troops. I wouldn't repeat that mistake. We had plenty of gold, spoils from all the towns the Alliance had looted. After a day's rest, I approached Fabio before we set off again. Sir, morale is low. We need to fix that, he shrugged. We're retreating. Low morale is normal. We're not going to fight. So what does it matter? I pointed at the troops assembling in the distance. What do you see? An army. What else? No? That's the foundation of your rise. How good are they? Still below regular army standard. And compared to noble serf soldiers, he scoffed. Don't insult me. They're proper soldiers now. They'd crush any serf unit. But they're still legally serfs, I said quietly. He paused. Well, yes. What if they weren't? What if you gave them the status of free citizens? He scratched his head. That's tricky. They belong to other nobles. Granting them freedom without permission. Who's going to object? How would they object? Sir, you command over 10,000 armed soldiers. You're a legion commander. He saw the logic, but was still confused. Even if I free them and boost morale, how does that become my power base? I can't afford to maintain a legion. I don't even have a territory. Sir, is this the worst regular legion in the duchy? No. They're actually decent, especially at long-distance marching. That makes them a solid field army. Exactly. You can't afford them, but the duchy can. Building a legion like this from scratch costs a fortune. You're about to hand the Grand Duke a battle-tested, fully equipped army, ready to fight. What do you think he'll give you for that? At minimum, a hereditary viscountcy, and that would be him being cheap. Fabio's breathing quickened. You're right. And the promises I make to the soldiers become the Duke's promises. The other nobles can't blame me. Once I deliver the legion, I officially join the mid-tier nobility. Sir, I think you're missing my point. I'm saying you keep this army. Don't give up command. You can't afford them? Someone will fund you. No territory? With 10,000 elite soldiers, even counts won't dare raise their voice to you. Fabio spun around and stared at me hard. Don't ever say that to anyone else. If this gets out, I can't protect you. Sir, whether you accept it or not, you've personally built a legion that answers to you. Every noble in the duchy will see you as a threat to their land. That's happening regardless of what you decide. He went quiet. I let the silence sit, then shifted to the immediate issue. For now, just free them. Give them hope. Give them a goal that transforms serfs into warriors. The rest we figure out later. What matters now is that warriors march faster and fight harder than slaves. 2 hours later, Fabio rode to the front of the formation and raised his voice. By the authority of the Warrior Duchy and the Rhine family, I declare that from this moment, you are no longer serfs. You are free citizens. You belong to no lord. I will lead you to my domain, where you will build homes and raise families. From this day forward, you are not a serf army. You are a regular legion of the Warrior Duchy. Every benefit other legions receive, I guarantee you will receive. Warriors who bled beside me, our battle is finished. This war is no longer ours. Now, I'm taking you home. A long silence followed. Fabio glanced at me nervously, thinking I'd been wrong. Then the roar came. 10,000 voices screaming his name, shaking the air like thunder. Fabio stood there on his horse, trembling. Not from fear. From the feeling of it. All those people calling for him. So this was what power tasted like. 2 days after Fabio freed the soldiers, an elite cavalry force arrived at Six Bay Mountain. The Nighthawk Knights, 5,000 strong, wearing black cloaks embroidered with a striking bird of prey. They carried 4-meter lances and wore full armor. A charging cavalry unit, the kind every nation treats as its most prized mobile force. They'd been sent to hunt us down. But while they were talking with the defending general at our old fortifications, a royal messenger arrived with new orders. The Nighthawk Knights wheeled around and galloped southwest, reassigned to chase the Alliance's main army instead. Among those riders was a soldier named Obion, burning with hatred for the Alliance that had killed his family. My father. We passed within miles of each other and never knew it. At least fate spared us the horror of father fighting son. I knew nothing about any of this. I was focused on reaching our first resupply point, Tombstone City, 2 days away. My whole plan depended on how the local nobles reacted. When we arrived in the area, the city was in a panic. The local lord, Saxony, had gathered all the surrounding nobles in his castle to discuss what to do. According to what I pieced together later, the meeting was a circus. Every noble talked tough about fighting the invaders, starving us out, holding the walls. But not one of them volunteered to actually go outside and fight. These were the same men who bragged at every banquet about their battlefield exploits, stories that grew more heroic with every glass of wine, especially when ladies were present. Now that a real enemy was at their gates, they'd all abandoned their own castles and run to Tombstone City, claiming they'd come to discuss strategy. Lord Saxony was furious but kept his composure. He presented them with my message, a letter offering to buy supplies at fair market price. We weren't here to conquer or destroy. We just wanted food, a day or two of rest, and then we'd leave. The nobles immediately dismissed it as a trick. They're out of supplies. Starve them out. Bloodless victory. Saxony then shared the second part of my message. If nobody would trade with us, we couldn't guarantee we wouldn't start raiding. We had no interest in attacking Tombstone City itself, but the nobles' undefended castles and estates outside the walls. Those would make easy targets. The room went dead silent. After a long, awkward pause, an old viscount named Grass cleared his throat. Well, they're offering fair prices. They're merchants, really, not an army. Perhaps trading with them isn't the worst idea. Others quickly agreed. The question shifted to logistics, how to conduct the trade safely and ensure both sides kept their word. They'll send an envoy, Saxony told them. Someone to work out the details. Back at our camp, Fabio was not happy with my plan for that envoy. Absolutely not. You're not going. If something happens to you, it's not worth it. Someone has to go meet them face to face, I said. Then send someone else. Not a child. I shook my head. Only I know every detail of this plan. Sending anyone else means either briefing too many people or risking mistakes. And think about it. I'm a kid. They have no reason to kill a child. When I walked into Tombstone City, I played the part of a scared little boy perfectly. Lord Saxony frowned at me. They send a child? This shows no sincerity. I made my lip tremble. Yes, sir. I'm just a prisoner they captured. They're threatening my sister to make me deliver their message. The old Viscount Grass smiled gently. Don't be afraid, child. You're from the Kai Kingdom? I nodded. Yes, sir, from South Mouse Village. Nobody had heard of it. Nobody questioned it either. Nobles don't bother learning the names of tiny villages. My flawless Southern Kai accent was all the proof they needed. Then I delivered the proposal exactly as I designed it. Both sides placed their goods at separate locations. Each side sends inspectors to verify. No middlemen, no guarantees needed. Once confirmed, signal your people to collect. The nobles stayed quiet, still hesitant. So I lit the final match. They also said to think of it this way. You're not trading with the enemy. You fought a battle, drove them off, and seized war trophies. You even rescued captured Kai citizens. That's a great achievement, something you can officially report. You won't be punished. You'll be rewarded. Their eyes lit up like lanterns. Of course, these weren't purchases, they were spoils of war. Saxony saw he'd lost. Even killing me wouldn't help. The nobles would just trade privately. He handed the matter to Old Grass and walked away. But before leaving, he looked at me. Tell them to release every captured child, including you. That touched something in me. I genuinely liked this old soldier. But it was too late for me. I was bound too tightly to Fabio's fate. 3 days later, I led the nobles' agents to the exchange point. Dozens of prisoners and 2 carts of gold and silver were waiting. They verified everything, signaled their people, and cavalry came to haul it away. A knight asked me before leaving, "Are you sure you won't come with us? We can send someone else to tell them where to pick up their goods." I squeezed out tears. I can't. They still have my sister. He sighed and let me ride away on my mule. That afternoon, mountains of supplies rolled into our camp. The next day, we moved on as promised. With one successful trade under our belt, the rest came easier. I'd even arranged for the tombstone nobles to write informal letters of introduction. No official seals, just personal notes to friendly nobles along our route, vouching that we were trustworthy trading partners. Fabio bought his way forward with gold. Most local nobles were happy to deal. A few stubborn ones tried to fight us instead. They got crushed. The new army was transforming, shedding its serf mentality, developing the discipline and aggression of real soldiers. Somewhere along the way, our force earned a name, the Iron Wall Legion. Fabio loved it and made it official. Here's the beautiful irony of our trading scheme. Every noble who traded with us reported it as a military victory. They'd defeated the fearsome Iron Wall Legion and captured valuable war spoils. To make their story convincing, they exaggerated our strength. Each retelling made us sound more terrifying, and the few who actually fought us and lost, they exaggerated even more to explain their defeat. By the time we'd been marching through Eastern Kai Kingdom for 2 months, fighting a dozen skirmishes, the Iron Wall Legion had become legendary. According to official reports, we'd suffered over 6,000 casualties. But here we were, still over 10,000 strong. The kingdom's military must have been confused. Was this some kind of super legion with 20,000 men? The truth was simpler. The nobles had been lying through their teeth the whole time. When we finally approached the border, we hit a wall. The Kai Kingdom's border garrison was nervous. They'd heard the legends and didn't want to fight us. But letting us pass without resistance would be impossible to explain to their superiors. Then a kingdom legion of 7,000 arrived from the south with orders to join the 6,000 border troops and destroy us. 13,000 against our 10,000 plus. But when they saw our actual numbers, they panicked. Their intelligence said we should be down to maybe 4,000 or 5,000 after all those losses. Instead, they were looking at a full-strength veteran legion. We stared at each other across 10 miles. Neither side attacked. As I put it to Fabio, it's like 2 men threatening each other with sticks, both afraid the other's stick is bigger. But this standoff couldn't last. They had a fortress behind them and steady supplies. We had limited food and autumn was turning to winter. If reinforcements arrived or the cold set in, we were finished. Fabio called a full military meeting that lasted all day. Nobody came up with a plan he liked. That evening, he found me. Any ideas? I thought about it. Use our advantage. He looked confused. What advantage? I grinned. Everyone calls us the Running Legion as an insult. But that's exactly what we're good at. They're trying to block us, so we make them chase us. Let's see who runs better. His eyes lit up. We outrun them back across the border? Not yet. There's still a river to cross. If we try to ford it with an intact enemy army behind us, they'll slaughter us halfway across. We need to hurt them first, or at least scare them enough to back off. I'm thinking we stay in this area, make fast short-range moves, and force them to keep up. They'll exhaust themselves. Will they take the bait? They have no choice. If we start moving, we threaten to cut off their supply route to the fortress. They're carrying less food than we are. They have to respond. I continued. Also, they're 2 separate units, the border garrison and the relief legion. Together, they keep each other honest. Neither dares slack off with the other watching. So we split our force in 2, which forces them to split as well. Once separated, without anyone looking over their shoulder, each commander will fight just hard enough to save face. Then let us go. Fabio liked it. He called a second meeting that night to hammer out the details. When the plan was done, he showed it to me. I tweaked a few small things but approved the rest. I had better ideas, but I wasn't the general. Pushing too hard would cross a line, and honestly, the Iron Wall Legion wasn't skilled enough to execute anything more complex. Then came the argument. I told Fabio I wanted to go with the right wing. He refused immediately. Are you crazy? This isn't serf soldiers. These are real troops. Your little body can't handle it. Stay behind me where my guards can protect you. But I had my reasons. Being next to the main banner meant being the biggest target on the field. That's where every enemy I would focus. The right wing was safer. I couldn't say that, so I framed it differently. Sir, only you and I truly understand this plan. You'll lead the left wing perfectly. But if something goes wrong on the right and there's nobody who grasps the full picture, it could ruin everything. If you tell Commander Duvian that I carry your authority in emergencies, both wings can adapt on the fly. We'll crush the enemy and meet at the river. The right wing commander, Duvian, was someone I'd been quietly cultivating for months. A real night-level fighter without the formal title, he'd been Fabio's friend in the silent battle axe days. I treated his battle wounds twice, once at Six Bay Mountain when he was badly hurt, and again during our retreat when I gave up my own mule so he could ride while injured. He was one of the best of our 14 battalion commanders, and I'd subtly steered Fabio toward choosing him for this role. Fabio finally gave in, but made Duvian swear to protect me. He even hinted that if things went badly, getting me out alive mattered more than winning. 2 days later, we moved. The Iron Wall Legion surged forward. The enemy braced for a head-on charge, but at 500 or 600 meters out, we stopped cold. Before the two enemy generals could figure out what was happening, our army split into 2 columns and started running, left and right, fast and organized. What are they doing? Trying to go around us. Are they trying to encircle us? They don't have the numbers. Are they heading for the river? But they haven't built any crossing. Wait, they're cutting off our retreat. The moment they understood, both enemy commanders committed their forces. The border garrison general was the shrewder one. He spotted that our right wing was smaller and lacked the Legion's main banner. He charged straight at us. Duvian kept his cool. He ordered every officer to control their soldiers' pace. Don't panic. Don't speed up. Stay steady. At the closest point, the enemy was barely 200 meters behind us. But this was what all those months of running had built. Their sprinting troops gradually slowed as exhaustion set in. Our men kept the same steady pace they'd practiced hundreds of times. We dragged the border army on a chase for over 2 kilometers, and they couldn't close the gap. Every time the border army tried to stop and catch their breath, Duvian immediately swung our formation toward their exposed flank. Their general had no choice but to order his men to keep running to block us. From above, we must have looked like 2 giant snakes writhing across the landscape, each trying to bite the other's belly. Within 30 minutes, one snake started getting fatter, not stronger, but sloppier. The border army was falling apart. Soldiers were dropping out of formation, gasping, stumbling. Some collapsed on the ground entirely. I'd been watching for exactly this moment. I told Duvian now. He ordered a full stop. Front became rear, the whole column spun around, and in barely 10 minutes we had a proper attack formation. The border general saw what was coming and blew his horn for a defensive line, but his men were scattered and wheezing. By the time our front ranks started pushing forward, half his soldiers still hadn't found their units. The Iron Wall Legion's vanguard punched through their defense like a spear through paper. Our men had developed a habit from all those months of running together. If you got separated, you merged into the nearest squad. In battle, this translated perfectly. We fought in 100-man blocks. If a block got too big, officers instantly split it into 2 standard formations. If soldiers fell out, they joined the closest group. It was simple, but against an exhausted, disorganized enemy, it was devastating. The border troops outnumbered us, but numbers mean nothing when your men can barely lift their weapons. Our 100-man squares rolled through them, long spears thrusting in unison. The border general threw in his personal guard and his 1,000-man cavalry unit in desperation. Following my instructions, Duvian held back our 500 cavalry. Instead, he sent several infantry blocks to seal the direction the enemy cavalry was trying to break through. Once boxed into the chaotic melee, cavalry without speed was no better than infantry. Our shielded spear formations began squeezing their riding room down to nothing. 2 hours into the fight, I led my own 100-man squad into the battle. These were my personal unit, former serfs who'd been running with me since the Wildfield city camp. I trained them in formation changes, used them as my messengers at Six Bay Mountain, and as my bodyguards during the trading missions. When stubborn nobles refused to deal, these men delivered the violent persuasion. They weren't the strongest unit in the Legion, but they were the ones I could command most naturally. None of them had ever treated me like a child. Our mission was to push the border general into a specific position. We carried large shields and long spears, with just short swords for backup. In close combat, reach is king. I directed the formation forward, spearing aside every border soldier in our path without chasing anyone. We drove straight at the enemy's main banner. After hours of fighting, most border troops were too tired to resist a fresh unit. Their defensive circle around the general, about 700 men, was already cracking under pressure from all sides. When my squad hit them, The line tore wide open. Then the real fighting started. I blocked a sword slash with my shield, got knocked backward, and thrust my spear into the gap between an enemy's helmet and armor. As I pulled the spear free, a greatsword chopped through the shaft. The armored soldier swung upward at my shield arm. I smashed the broken spear handle into his face, forcing him to flinch, then caught his blade on my shield. I stepped in close, drew my short sword in a reverse grip, and drove it sideways through his neck. Blood sprayed as I pulled it out. Before I could adjust my grip, another sword came crashing down. I blocked with the reversed short sword, but the impact slammed the blade into my own shoulder. The attacker pressed down harder, forcing me to one knee. His heavy sword bit half a centimeter into my blade. He twisted and swung horizontally at my head. My sword guard caught it, but the force drove the metal into my helmet with a sickening clang. My vision swam. Fighting through the dizziness, I bashed his sword arm with my shield. When he lurched forward, I dropped the ruined short sword, pulled a small hand crossbow, aimed at the gap in his helmet, and squeezed the trigger. The 5-inch bolt punched through the visor slot. He fell backward, dead. I tossed the destroyed short sword aside. The leather armor on my shoulder was sliced open, showing the chainmail underneath. I rolled my left shoulder. A spike of pain told me the shoulder blade was probably fractured. Adrenaline buried the sensation almost instantly. I picked up the dead man's longsword and charged at the next enemy rushing toward me. All I had to do was buy time. My spear formation was cutting through to reach me. I just had to survive until they arrived. My plan was straightforward. My 100-man squad would tear open the enemy's defensive circle, and the rest of our troops would pour through the gap. It started fine, until several actual knights charged out at us. Not men on horses, warriors with knight-level combat power. Their battle aura was spent, but they wore full heavy armor, wielded great swords, and had the physical strength to mow through my soldiers like a harvesting machine. I had to step in. My original role was supposed to be the archer hiding behind the formation, the range damage dealer. But just like in games, the shooter always draws the most hate. After I sniped one knight with my bow, the rest locked onto me immediately. One smashed through my guards and came straight for me. The others pushed my soldiers back to keep them from helping. I was cut off from my squad, alone against a wounded but still terrifying knight. Luckily, 3 months of intense training had pushed my body well beyond adult levels. Shield in one hand, spear in the other, I fought a desperate close-quarters duel and finally killed him. Then more elite soldiers rushed in. The one I killed with the hand crossbow was my 6th elite that day. By then I was fighting 2 armored soldiers at once with a borrowed longsword and battered shield, hanging on by pure stubbornness. But I could hear it behind me. My squad had finished off the 4 remaining knights and was cutting through to reach me. Sure enough, just as 2 soldiers pressed me hard, spears shot past my shoulders and sent both men sprawling. More of my men flooded in and finished them on the ground. They tried to shield me, but I shoved them aside and pointed my sword at the enemy's command banner. Forget me. Push forward. Cut that flag down. Minutes later, I climbed over a pile of bodies and slashed the banner down with one swing. The border general was already gone. His guards had dragged him out when I breached the inner circle. We'd planned this. Duvian had intentionally left an escape route. We wanted the general alive and running, not cornered and fighting to the death. But his soldiers didn't know he'd escaped. My guards screamed in the Kai Kingdom tongue, "Your commander is dead. Surrender and live." The border army broke. Total rout. Duvian sent our 500 cavalry to chase and scatter them. By dusk, our right wing regrouped, did a quick sweep of the battlefield, and marched toward the border river. 2 days later we arrived and immediately started building rafts. A day after that, Fabio's left wing caught up. He'd crushed the other enemy force too. He wanted to rest. I said no. We just destroyed their border garrison. That's exactly why we need to cross faster. The kingdom can't allow a third front to open up during their counteroffensive. They'll send elite forces to wipe us out. If enemy scouts show up tomorrow morning, it proves I'm right. The next morning, cavalry scouts appeared all around us. Fabio stopped arguing. He ordered everyone to start chopping trees. That first night, I didn't waste time with individual rafts. I lashed them together into a pontoon bridge. In one night, we moved over 2,000 wounded and 1,000 support personnel across. The river was only about 200 meters wide, and the autumn floods had passed. Most areas were only 4 meters deep, shallow enough to drive tall wooden poles into the riverbed as anchor points for the bridge. At dawn, we disassembled the bridge back into ordinary rafts to fool the enemy scouts. The second and third nights, I prioritized supplies over soldiers. Once we reached the duchy, we might go a long time without resupply. The duchy's nobles wouldn't want an oversized private legion that only obeyed Fabio. So we had to bring everything: winter clothing, blankets, food, pack animals. Combined with whatever the duchy eventually provided, it would be enough to survive the winter. During the day, we floated rafts across openly, but slowly and inefficiently, carrying only cavalry and treasure chests. It was theater. I wanted the border scouts watching from the hills to see a greedy commander lazily ferrying his favorites and his gold. Based on the visible raft traffic, their intelligence would calculate we needed at least a month to move everyone across. They had no idea about the bridges we built every night. By the 7th day of crossing, most of the army was already on the other side. But that afternoon, our scouts reported an elite cavalry force had entered the kingdom's border fortress to rest. I knew we had until tomorrow at best. That night, I ordered all 4 pontoon bridges deployed at once. The rush caused some men to fall into the river, but at least their armor was already across. Most survived. By dawn, over 2,000 people still hadn't crossed, and we couldn't wait for nightfall again. I switched to daytime crossing. The border scouts immediately figured out what was happening and launched signal flares. I told Fabio to go across first. He refused to leave. I estimated the kingdom's elite cavalry would arrive by noon at the latest. 2,000 people on shaky pontoon bridges that could only hold so much weight. This was going to be tight. Worse, more than half the remaining troops were cavalry. Horses on a swaying bridge moved painfully slow, needing constant calming from their riders. I shoved backup rafts into the water and loaded infantry onto them. Even after all our practice during the long march, it took nearly an hour to paddle 200 meters. At least once the first batch reached the far side, we could tie ropes between the banks so the next group could be pulled across faster. I had my men tear down every remaining tent and load everything onto rafts. Finally, the cavalry finished crossing, but several hundred soldiers were still on the west bank. I ordered everyone onto the bridges and had the western anchor ropes cut. I could already feel the ground trembling from approaching hooves. Cut the underwater ropes. Now, without the fixed posts holding them, the bridges began drifting with the current. The eastern shore ropes still held, so the bridges swung out into the river and then slowly pivoted back toward our side. Everyone lay flat, gripping the planks, terrified of capsizing. Then I saw them. Red cloaks. The Nighthawk Knights, the kingdom's most fearsome charging cavalry, lined up on the western bank in perfect formation, watching us drift away. Silent. Intimidating. Even with a river between us, the pressure they radiated was suffocating. Fabio and the soldiers started cheering and shouting taunts across the water. "Get down," I screamed. "They're going to shoot." The Nighthawk commander raised his hand. A row of riders behind him lifted bows from their saddles in perfect unison. Into the water. Used the rafts as shields. I rolled off the bridge into the freezing river. The wood above me shuddered with impacts. I held my breath for over a minute before surfacing on the far side of the raft. It looked like a pincushion, arrows bristling from every inch of wood. Around me, soldiers were pinned to their rafts by arrows. Bodies floated in the current. They kept shooting. I gulped air and dove back under. 2 more rounds of breathing later, I felt mud under my feet. The water was only shoulder deep near the bank. I surfaced and swam to shore. Soldiers with shields hauled me up just as Fabio, wrapped in a blanket, soaking wet, was jumping around screaming, "Get archers! Shoot back at them!" I ran over, dripping and shivering. "Sir, stop. We made it across. That's the biggest insult we could give them. Don't waste arrows." He grumbled, but let it go. After I changed clothes, I found Fabio pulling bodies off the rafts and collecting enemy arrows. He held one up for me to see. "Look at this. Heavy armor-piercing arrowheads, over 2 inches long. The Nighthawk Knights don't cheap out. These things aren't cheap." I took the arrow and understood why it had punched through bodies and nailed men to wooden planks. These weren't ordinary arrows. Fabio sighed. "We were so close to getting everyone out clean. Lost nearly 100 men right at the end." I kept my thoughts to myself. This was your fault. The enemy was ready to let us go. Your soldiers' taunting provoked that volley. Without armor, everything had been sent ahead. We were completely exposed. 100 dead, plus wounded who'd lose half their number to infection. Over 200 lives thrown away for the pleasure of talking trash. But Fabio felt no regret at all. He was actually excited. We engaged the Nighthawk Knights and got away. No infantry legion in any country can say that. Sure, if you want to spin it that way. I asked him about the Nighthawks. He corrected me. They were a knight order, not just cavalry. 6,000 strong, roughly 1,000 actual knights among them. Every squad leader held knight rank. The rest had all received formal knight training. No infantry dared face their charge without fortifications. They were on the same level as the Billier Kingdom's Red Eagle Knights, true battle deciders. Our duchy has been trying to build a knight order for years, Fabio said. We've only managed 2,000 riders with about 300 knights. Nothing compared to the real thing. He clapped my shoulder. Anyway, we made it home. Time to rest. I took one last look across the river at those silent red-cloaked riders, standing in their flawless formation. That was the kind of army I wanted to build someday. After crossing the river, we rested 2 days and marched again. When we emerged from a forest, a duchy outpost spotted us and lit signal fires in panic. But we weren't enemies. We were coming home. Fabio showed his official seal and alliance commission papers. The outpost captain couldn't verify them, so he reported up the chain. Days later, a noble officer came, checked Fabio's credentials, and said he couldn't authorize our entry either. We could camp nearby while they figured it out. We waited and waited. Half a month passed. Snow started falling. The duchy still hadn't responded. Fabio went to the border fortress commander, practically begging for winter supplies. The commander claimed they had nothing to spare. Fabio knew that was a lie. Every border fortress stockpiled enough food for 8,000 people to survive a 3-year siege. But he held his temper, declined an invitation to stay in the fortress alone for winter, and came back to camp. I told him not to pick fights with small men. The fortress commander is just following orders. The people blocking us are much higher up. We still have money. Let me take some men to Iron Pit City nearby and buy what we need. 5 days after I left with a dozen guards to purchase supplies, everything fell apart. Halfway to the city, we encountered cavalry scouts from the border fortress. They had orders to bring me to meet someone. I guessed it was the Grand Duke's envoy, wanting to use me as a go-between to negotiate terms with Fabio. Before I could even agree, a figure exploded out of the shadows behind the cavalry. In seconds, several riders had their throats cut without even raising a hand. I knew instantly this was a professional, a real combat specialist. I ordered my guards into formation and reached for a signal flare. The attacker knocked it from my hand before I could fire it. My men were battlefield veterans, but against this ghost-like assassin, they didn't last long. I managed a few exchanges before he disarmed me and knocked me unconscious. I woke up in a cave. The man said nothing. He ignored my questions completely. He didn't hurt me further, but he searched me thoroughly, confiscating every hidden tool and weapon I carried. Every day, he gave me food and water, laced with something that kept me too weak to move. Days passed. Then one morning, he dragged me out of the cave and sat me on the ground to watch something in the distance. The Iron Wall Legion was storming the border fortress. A hooded man crouched beside me. See? Quite effective, isn't it? When I stayed silent, he laughed. Clever kid. So you figured out why Sir Fabio had you captured, right? He needed a reason to attack. Your death gave him one. I spoke quietly. You work for Count Obakin. You're here to eliminate me as a liability. Fabio didn't order this. He's too soft for that. I understood now what had happened while I was gone. Fabio had sent Duvian to look for me. They found bodies. My guards, destroyed beyond recognition, but clearly our people. One body was roughly my size. The evidence pointed to the fortress's cavalry scouts. Whether Fabio truly believed I was dead, or just needed to believe it, the result was the same. He gathered his officers. He asked them who they were. They roared back. The Iron Wall Legion. He asked them whose legion it was. Yours. Then he told them about the insult. No supplies, no campsite, no permission to move, and now his people were being murdered. He drew his sword and asked what should be done. Fight, they screamed. The next morning, the Iron Wall Legion smashed into the border fortress. The garrison didn't stand a chance. Watching from the hillside, powerless and drugged, I realized the trap I was caught in. Count Abacan had orchestrated everything. He needed Fabio to seize the fortress. It gave his son a real power base and forced the duchy to negotiate seriously. But Fabio would never attack fellow countrymen without cause. So Abacan's agent kidnapped me, faked my death, pointed the evidence at the fortress, and let Fabio's rage do the rest. And me? I was the loose end. The person who knew too much, who was too clever, who might one day become a threat instead of a tool. Abacan's man wasn't here to rescue me. He was here to decide whether I lived or died. The hooded man was Count Abacan's shadow guard, a professional assassin, a class above ordinary soldiers. I looked up at him. I have a question. Since I'm dead either way, can you satisfy my curiosity first? Ask. Whether I answer is up to me. I think I've done well. I never harmed the Count's interests. I never let Fabio get hurt. I kept pushing him upward. Isn't making his youngest son more capable a good thing? I'm still young. I could help Fabio even more in the future. So why does the Count want me dead? The shadow guard didn't deny who he worked for. You've done well. But your timing is wrong. If the eldest son were still alive, the Count would have supported you fully. But now the eldest is dead. The youngest becomes the heir. And the Rhine family carries royal blood. That bloodline's honor cannot be stained. I sighed. I see. I understand now. And I truly did. I'd made a critical error. An error born from applying my past life's logic to this world. In my old world, a strategist who delivered results would be valued, celebrated, recruited with open arms. But here, honor and reputation meant more to nobles than practical results. Everything I'd done, convincing Fabio to run from the night raid, and then spinning it into a triumph, the brutal trap at Six Bay Mountain, the under-the-table deals with Kai Kingdom nobles during our long march. I saw these as smart moves. The nobility saw them as disgraceful. Tricks, schemes, conduct unworthy of a house with royal blood. And there was an even deeper problem. Abacan didn't want an exceptional heir. He wanted an adequate one. Above the Count sat the Grand Duke, the true ruler. A son who was too capable, commanding a powerful army, guided by a ruthless strategist pushing him ever higher. The only thing higher than Count was the Duke himself. That was a threat no father in this political system could tolerate. So Abacan had to make me disappear, not to hurt Fabio, but to protect him from being seen as dangerously ambitious. I laughed bitterly at myself. I'd finally taken a risk, tried a shortcut to power, and walked straight into a trap of my own making. The shadow guard noticed my bitter smile. What exactly did you figure out? I closed my eyes. I didn't feel like explaining political theory to someone who wouldn't understand it. He caught my meaning, and his voice turned cold. I satisfied your curiosity. Now satisfy mine. Answer well enough, and maybe I'll let you live. My eyes snapped open. I actually laughed. So your orders aren't to kill me. Let me guess. You're supposed to send me to the Billier Kingdom. Why not the Kai Kingdom? You little country bumpkin from Splitstream Bay. I froze for a second, then relaxed. Of course. If Abacan had planned all this, he'd investigated me thoroughly. He knew my real identity. A commoner's son from an enemy nation, not a Billier Knight's orphan. I shrugged. Either country works. I can live anywhere. The Count said to let you go. He didn't say you had to leave in one piece. Missing a few parts, he wouldn't mind. I cooperated immediately. What do you want to know? Why the Count didn't kill me? Why he had you kidnap me? Why he framed the border garrison? So I explained everything. Abacan couldn't kill me because Fabio had sworn an oath using the Rhine family name to protect me. Breaking that oath would damage the family honor he was trying to preserve. The kidnapping and framing served a different purpose. It gave Fabio a reason to attack the fortress. That act of rebellion would become a mark against him, something the Grand Duke could punish lightly, while other nobles would see as proof that Fabio was hot-headed and reckless. That perception would actually protect him. Nobody fears a fool. It would give Abacan room to quietly maneuver his son into the heir's position without alarming anyone. After I finished, I offered 2 parting gifts. Tell the Count, keep the Iron Wall Legion intact. It will be the foundation of Fabio's power. Then I looked at the Shadow Guard. And for you personally, you're a shadow who knows too many secrets. That's a dangerous position. I'd suggest less curiosity in the future. He scowled. Worry about yourself. I'm taking you to the Billier Kingdom. Behave on the road, or I'll cut out your tongue. And don't show your face in the duchy for 10 years. If you do, this place becomes your grave. I nodded agreeably. 10 years. Sure. In my mind, I figured 6 years at most before I could snap this man's neck with my bare hands. Over the past months, I'd used all the cultivation medicine, 37 bottles total, including some I'd secretly acquired during trades with Kai Kingdom nobles. That amount should have been more than enough to push an ordinary person to knight rank. But while my body had grown incredibly strong, I still couldn't feel any trace of battle aura. I had two theories. Maybe my body was still too young, my meridians or organs not mature enough to generate aura. Or maybe, deep down, my materialist soul from my old world couldn't fully embrace this world's mystical cultivation. Some part of me still doubted it was real, and that doubt was blocking me. Either way, I was getting stronger every single day. I wasn't worried. As for the 10-year exile, I didn't care much. By then I'd be an adult with accomplishments of my own. If the Billier Kingdom treated me well, maybe I'd stay. If not, I could always come back and grab on a Fabio's coattails. The game was far from over. 3 months of walking. That's how long it took the Shadow Guard to drag me across the entire Warrior Duchy and into the Billier Kingdom. By the time my feet touched Billier's soil, winter had passed and warmth was returning. He handed me a small bundle. Inside, some dried food, a little money, barely enough to survive a few months, and a hand-carved wooden dog, which was the token I'd need to show at a place called the Mozong Tavern. Someone there would take me to wherever I'd been assigned to live. I had to stay in that city for at least 1 year. If I tried to run, he'd come find me, and next time wouldn't be pleasant. Before he left, I asked 2 things. When does this poison wear off? And I want my weapons back. They're from my teacher. He glared at me, left briefly, then came back and tossed Daybreak and the Great Bow at my feet. I don't like how you look at me, kid. You're not as smart as you think. These weapons mean a lot to me. I don't have money now, but when you come check on me in a year, I'll pay you back, he sneered. The drug wears off in a few days. You'll have your strength back. Then he was gone. I cleaned my sword, adjusted the bowstring, and hummed a little tune. I didn't try to run. That nasty Shadow Guard might still be watching, looking for an excuse to beat me. An hour later, a gloomy-looking man came in, glanced at me and my token, and told me to follow him. We walked through filthy narrow streets to a rundown tavern, the Mozong Tavern. He took me to a basement room and left. I looked around and immediately understood. That spiteful Shadow Guard had dumped me in a child trafficking operation. This was a holding station where kidnapped children were kept before being sold. He was probably watching from somewhere, laughing. I sighed, ate some food, and fell asleep to the sound of children crying next door. 2 days later, my body was recovering. I estimated 1 more week before I'd be back to full strength. That same day, the traffickers had gathered enough children. They herded us into a cramped wagon. On the way in, they seized my pack and my weapons. Daybreak and the Great Bow. They saw quality steel and figured it was worth good money. I looked at the armed men with crossbows standing guard. Still too weak to fight. Not yet. I asked the gloomy man one question. How much did I sell for? 17 silver coins. That's not cheap. You'd better be worth it, or you'll regret it. 17 silver coins. I burned that number into my memory. That was my starting price in this world. 17 silver coins for a human life. I told myself to never forget what I was worth to these people. From the traffickers' conversations, I learned we were heading to a baron's territory that was buying young serfs. The trip would take about 10 days, with stops at towns along the way to sell children to anyone interested. I was too big and looked like I'd eat too much, so nobody bought me at the first 2 stops. 5 children were sold, including a girl. I didn't cause trouble. I didn't react to being hit or cursed at. Why argue with dead men? In 7 days I'd have my strength back, and then these people would cease to exist. On the 5th night, the weather turned bad. Rain was coming. The traffickers found a sheltered spot, set up tents, and started drinking. In the dead of night, I opened my eyes. I pulled a thin wire from inside my boot and picked the lock on my ankle chains. But I didn't go for the wagon door. Instead, I reached into the hidden lining of my clothes and pulled out strips of dried meat. I chewed slowly, rebuilding my energy. Then I pulled out something else. 2 steel spikes, each a foot long and thin as a finger, hidden in my clothing seams. A child next to me watched with wide eyes as I drew them out like a magic trick. I put a finger to my lips. Stay quiet. I climbed silently to the top corner of the wagon, bracing myself against the ceiling with one hand, one spike in my teeth, the other aimed at the door below. Then I heard it, screaming outside. Cursing. Weapons clashing. Someone was attacking the traffickers. Before I could react, arrows punched through the wagon walls. They tore through the huddled children inside. The screaming and crying became deafening. I twisted my head just in time to dodge a shaft that came through right where my face had been. When the door finally swung open, someone looked inside at the carnage and swore, "Damn it. These are slavers, not a cargo shipment. It's just kids in here." I held my breath in the dark corner of the wagon's ceiling and listened. Damn, thought this was a big score. Just broke slavers. Wrap it up. Let's move. The rain will wash away our tracks. Ironhead, check for survivors inside. Kill them or burn it. The door opened and a big man squeezed in, stabbing children one by one with his sword. The boy who'd watched me climb up was still alive, reaching toward me with a trembling hand. Save. Save. Me. The killer followed the boy's pointing finger and turned around. I was already dropping from the ceiling. I landed on his back and drove my steel spike straight into his temple. He went stiff and collapsed into the pile of bodies. The man at the door stared at me in shock. Before he could shout, I caught the spike from my teeth with my left hand and threw it. It went into his open mouth and out the back of his skull. I grabbed my other spike, leaped out of the wagon as his body fell, and rolled underneath it. Quick scan, about a dozen bandits total, scattered around looting the dead traffickers. Only 2 had noticed me. The rest were busy with spoils. These weren't ordinary robbers. The standardized leather armor and military swords told me they were army deserters turned bandits. Dangerous people. I needed to reach the tree line. No armor meant one good arrow could finish me. And the weakness drug still hadn't fully worn off. A straight fight against this many-armed men would be suicide. I dropped to all fours and crawled fast across the ground. Before the 2 who'd spotted me could react, I was behind another bandit. Steel spike through the neck. Then I spun to his front and snatched his sword. Left hand pulled the spike free, jabbed it up through his jaw, and I lifted his body as a shield. 2 arrows thunked into the corpse. I was already moving, reaching another bandit. A twist of the sword opened his wrist. As his weapon dropped, my spike found his throat. Another body shield. But this time I noticed something on his back. Daybreak. My sword. This thief had claimed it as his trophy. I dropped the borrowed blade, drew Daybreak, and ducked behind a tent. They'd lost sight of me. I planted the sword in the dirt, picked up a military bow, and grabbed arrows. I held one arrow against the bow shaft with my grip hand, knocked another, and kicked the corpse I'd propped against the tent out into the open. 3 archers had been aiming at me. 2 shot at the tumbling body. The third was drawing a fresh arrow. I stepped out from the left side and released, 1 archer down. My fingers flicked the spare arrow onto the string. Before the third archer could even aim, my second shaft punched through his neck. I tossed the bow, grabbed Daybreak, and burst from the right side of the tent, around the back of another tent. But 2 bandits had anticipated me and moved to cut off my path to the trees. I skidded to a stop, kicked dirt into the right one's eyes, clashed swords with the left one. Before he could push back, my knee smashed into his groin. As he doubled over, my spike went through his throat. My descending right foot swept into the blinded man's knee pit, dropping him. I spun and took his head off with 1 stroke. The tree line was close. I sprinted for it. Then a man stumbled out of the trees, pulling up his pants. Of all the rotten luck, I ran him through without breaking stride, but the delay cost me a precious second. I heard bowstrings behind me. I wrenched the dying man around as a shield. Arrows slammed into his back. Then 2 more bandits closed in and cut off my escape. I fought them with everything I had. My swordsmanship was better, my experience deeper, but the drug still sapping my strength meant I couldn't finish them quickly. More bandits surrounded me. Minutes later, I was leaning on Daybreak, gasping, bleeding from several cuts. 4 more bodies lay around me. 3 wounded bandits hung back, afraid to attack again. Others stood at a distance with crossbows aimed. A man in metal armor, their leader, called out, "Kid, you must be from some noble family. How'd you end up as a slave? Family destroyed? You've got real skill. Join me. Someday you could take over my position. Free life. No rules. Inherit his position? Become a bandit chief?" I spat blood and beckoned him forward. "Come fight me." I knew I was done, but I'd take at least 1 more with me. A crossbowman spoke up. "Boss, let's just shoot him. He killed too many of our brothers." The leader slapped him. "Did I ask for your opinion? Kill him, and we lose money on this whole raid. There's a place that pays top price for noble-born boys. Take him alive. They threw a fishing net over me. I couldn't dodge, couldn't cut through it fast enough. They swarmed me, fists and boots raining down from every direction. I blacked out from the beating and blood loss. Once again, I'd been captured. The pattern of my life in this world, clawing my way up, only to be dragged back down. But as long as I was alive, the game wasn't over.